in 12, NDP in none. The NDP loses the only seat it held east of the Ontario boundary. The Liberals are returning to many of their traditional areas of strength in the maritime provinces in particular, in Acadia and Cape Breton. And now the question is, will it hold as we move into Ontario and Quebec? Well, we're about to find out as our election night coverage continues as we roll across the country on this historic evening here on CTV.
From the CTV News Election Center in Toronto, Decision 88. Reported by Pamela Wallen, Mike Duffy, Nancy Wilson, and Lloyd Robertson.
We now welcome those viewers joining us in Quebec and Ontario, where the polls have just closed, where the count is underway. 174 ridings now come on stream, 75 in the province of Quebec and 99 in the province of Ontario. This is certainly crunch time. There is no question that by the time we finish this region at about an hour or 90 minutes from now, we will have some indication of the shape of the 34th Parliament. And here's how it went for some of the stars in the Atlantic region tonight. CTV has projected the election of Brad Woodside in Fredericton. Brad Woodside. And Humber Barb Bayvert, Brian Tobin re-elected. The Liberal. In St. John's West, no surprise there, John Crosby re-elected easily. We called him very early in the evening. And in Cape Breton, East Richmond, David Dingwall hangs on to that seat for the Liberals, a Liberal stronghold tonight in Cape Breton. So there we are, and it's moving in the direction of a lot of Liberals returning to traditional areas of strength in the Atlantic region, Pamela.
A lot of the Conservatives are saying that this is where it will stop when it hits the Quebec border, where we've seen in the last week or so a serious turnaround, where the people of Quebec have decided that they like free trade again, and they're going to keep their boy from Bay-Como in 24 Sussex. We've seen all that, so we'll watch what happens in Quebec and Ontario. A very interesting race about free trade, where the Premier's been on the other side of the issue than the Premier in the province of Quebec.
Now, you're looking at the popular vote tonight, and
yes,
I think we're going to turn up the popular vote chart right now so we can see just exactly what that holds for the people in Atlantic Canada.
We start to see the separation. They were running very close, the Liberals and the Conservatives, 43-42. Now we're starting to see the separation, 11-point lead for the Liberals in the popular vote, and that is breaking in their favor in terms of the seats as well. Sometimes you get a strong popular vote, but you don't get the seats to go along with it.
Pamela, we want to welcome, and it is a great delight for us, an old friend, Mike Duffy. He and I are from the same alma mater, as a matter of fact, the same broadcasting alma mater. Welcome to our show, Mike.
Lloyd, it's great to be here on this historic night. We've already seen some history being made in my home area of Atlantic Canada, and we're going to see a lot more, I think, before it's all over. Already, the Minister of Public Works, Stuart McGuinness, defeated in the riding of Halifax. We've seen Moncton, where the CN Shops was a problem, go back to the Liberal Party. Some dramatic changes in Atlantic Canada. The question is, will that change? Will that Liberal tide that's sweeping across Atlantic Canada continue on into Quebec and Ontario?
Yes, we should underline that, by the way. You noted it. That is that Stuart McGuinness, the Minister of Public Works, has been defeated in the riding of Halifax. Tom McMillan, the Minister of the Environment, is trailing at this moment in his riding in Prince Edward Island. There are 6 cabinet ministers in the Atlantic region. So far, 4 of them seem to be in pretty good shape. Now, here is the only man who survived the Tory tide the last time, Fernand Robichaud, re-elected in Beausejour. Omer Léger was trying to take him out for the Conservatives, but he didn't make it. Well, on this night, it's a national celebration for some. It's a wake for others, depending upon your party preference. But most of all, it is a national occasion, an election like this, which is so clearly an election on one particular issue. So we are hooked up right across the country, not just to bring you the results, but to bring you the analysis, to bring you the color, to bring you the cheers, to bring you the tears, and we have people all over the place. We have, for example, plugged in Jack Webster in Vancouver at BCTV, where Jack has gathered about 200 of his friends into a studio there. They are watching these results come in, and you're now on stream with Ontario and Quebec. Jack, we're going to tell people, of course, that you're not broadcasting these results out to the people of BC, but you're hearing them. What are you saying about them?
Anyway, it's a great change to be on the inside looking out instead of waiting till 8 o'clock to be treated with the back of your hand telling us the election is over. There is already a little whisper here among the Liberals, not such a whisper, that the roll is going to continue and that there's no way Mulroney can now get, I'm not saying it, a majority government. I'm just desperate to see when we come out of Quebec and Ontario, and to remind you people that we in BC may still decide the form of the next government, because we've got 32 seats. And the Libs, mind you, might get 3 if they're lucky, and the rest could be split NDP and Tory. So we may make the difference, and we're desperate to see if the role of the Libs does continue.
Thank you very much, Jack. There are 32 seats available out there in British Columbia, by the way. That's up 4 from last time. 4 seats added in Ontario, by the way, and 5 in Alberta. Now, up we go to Baie-Comeau, to Brian Mulroney's headquarters, and Craig Oliver is standing by there. Craig, come in.
Lloyd, they're not showing the slightest sign of nervousness, the Conservatives here in Baie-Comeau. In fact, they're confidently predicting they'll form another majority government, and they go even further than that. They're whispering the word in reporters' ears that their latest polling is showing that they will get a minimum of 170, a maximum, in fact, they're saying a probable 190 seats. So they think they're on their way here tonight. They're already savoring the taste of victory, Lloyd.
Thank you, Craig. Well, it's a very different story this time from 1984 in the Atlantic region, because in 84, the Conservatives won 24 and the Liberals won 8. Let's go to Alan Fryer, who is in... oh, I'm sorry. We're going to look at a return first of all, right? Let's look at a return. I think we have something coming in from the east. Or is it? No, the first return from Quebec. Here we come. From Saint-Jean. And hovering over this one is the shadow of Andre Bissonnette, and at this moment, the Liberal there, Dolbeck, has a lead, but as you see, it's very, very early. 1 poll out of 226 heard from. So that's the first one from Quebec, and the Liberal is leading.
And an update just from Moncton while we're here. The Liberal, George Rideout, has been elected. We've declared him elected.
And we are also declaring elected Roger Simmons, the Liberal, over Joe Price in Buren St. George's, the riding once held by Don Jamieson. There's George Rideout, the Liberal you just referred to, in Moncton.
Mayor of Moncton.
Mayor of Moncton, popular man, apparently. And now we are ready to go out to Alan Fryer, who is in John Turner's home riding of Vancouver Quadra. All right, Alan, are they clicking their glasses yet out there?
Not yet, Lloyd, but I must say that I'm having a slightly different story whispered into my ear than Craig is in Baie-Comeau. The place is still pretty much empty, as you may be able to see. There's still another 3 hours to go until the polls close here on the West Coast. But a couple of the Liberals who are around here are absolutely delighted about what they've been seeing coming out of the Maritimes. It certainly has surpassed their own expectations. And they're telling me that it does confirm what their own polling has been showing over the past couple of days, that there's been a movement towards the Liberals. They're expecting a minority government.
All right, let's flash straight back to Ontario, to Ed Broadbent's headquarters, where Mark Sixtum is standing by. What's the mood there at this stage of an evening when things aren't turning out quite the way expected at this stage, Mark?
Well, there's a fair amount of nail-biting going on here in the Canadian Auto Workers Union Hall, as you might expect, Lloyd. Especially dispiriting was the loss of St. John's East in Newfoundland, Jack Harris, and they consider that a bit of a bad omen. And that's not the only incumbent that the NDP is worried about. They're concerned about Ernie Epp in southern Manitoba and Dan Heap in the Toronto riding of Spadina. Yes, there's some concern here. They still expect to do better than they did in 1984. And if there's any silver lining so far to the Liberal strength, it's that it does increase the probability of a minority government. And that's good for the NDP because they'll hold the balance.
Thank you very much, Mark. We just want to point out one thing. We mentioned earlier that Roger Simmons or elected there in Buren St. George's. He was a member of the Trudeau cabinet.
Yes, indeed.
For a week.
For a week.
10 days, I think. 10 days.
And he was convicted of income tax evasion. He was forgiven by John Turner. He signed his nomination papers in something of a dispute.
And forgiven by the people.
Roger Simmons only made one mistake now, Lloyd. Let's not hold it against him.
Exactly.
He got caught.
Yeah, but he paid his price, and he's back in this House of Commons. 35 out of 295 seats have been heard from. We have only had one small return from Quebec at this stage, showing a Liberal leading, so we're still waiting for that flood to bury us, that snowstorm, in fact, that comes in from Quebec and Ontario. CTV News election night coverage continues after this. lead, just one poll reporting. But McDougall, according to the reports we've heard, Pamela, is expected to hang on to that in a riding that for many, many years was held by the NDP and has been Liberal from time to time. But it's because McDougall has worked very hard. He's considered a good member of Parliament.
A tough fight. I don't think that one's over.
Right. Here's a board that will demonstrate just how things have been going this evening throughout Atlantic Canada, where there are 32 seats. It's a gains and losses chart, which indicates who has taken what from whom. And there you have it. The Liberals have gained 12, and the Tories have lost 11. And the NDP has lost 1, that one NDP loss in St. John's.
And the popular vote spread continuing to spread incrementally. So we have 45% there for the Liberals, and that is an 11% increase. That's reflected, of course, in the number of seats that we're getting. The Conservatives doing very well with 40%, 41% of popular support, but they have lost 10 if you look at those results compared with 1984. So they're going down, and the Liberals are taking it all.
Here's how it looks for the members of the cabinet in the Atlantic region. There are 6 cabinet ministers altogether in the Atlantic. John Crosbie won re-election easily in St. John's. Elmer MacKay, in his riding of Central Nova in Nova Scotia, re-elected. McInnes, the Minister of Public Works, defeated by Mary Clancy in Halifax. And Tom McMillan, at this moment, is trailing in his riding of Hillsborough in Prince Edward Island. Bernard Valcourt, Minister of Small Business, leading, and Gerald Merrithew re-elected in St. John, New Brunswick.
Surprise there, with, of course, the big frigate contract that created several thousand jobs in the area. So that's very popular, and he's been put in charge of handing out Atlantic funds for the area. So that helps ensure re-election.
One thing, by the way, that we should note, while the people were lining up in St. John's half an hour before polling stations opened today in Newfoundland, the people in New Brunswick are having a very bad time. We're told that they had to bring heaters into the polling stations there. The power was off, terrible storms, powerful winds, snow, freezing rain in New Brunswick. So that certainly stopped the vote there. But everywhere else in the country, the indication is that it's a very heavy turnout today.
Yes, I think some weather problems in northern Quebec as well. But I think people want to go and vote. I've never seen such enthusiasm about a campaign and about an issue and people lining up. When I went to vote today, it was very busy. And of course, that was at around noon hour, but you could see the activity. And people have spent a lot of time thinking about the issues and what's at stake in this campaign.
And one thing that is at stake for Paul Martin Jr. is whether or not he is going to make it into the House of Commons for the first time from the riding of La Salle-et-Mar in Montreal. And there we have Ken Ernhofer standing by in his riding headquarters. Ken, anything happening yet from La Salle-et-Mar or from the ridings around there in Montreal? Because Montreal is key.
Well, Lloyd, people here have just started putting on the television sets and learning the news about the Maritimes. I was talking to Dennis Dawson, a former member of Parliament for Louis Hebert riding, and he thought it would be a 16-16 split in the Maritimes, so they're very encouraged. I should tell you a little bit about the ridings you've been looking at. Saint-Jean has been a traditional bellwether, so that's a good sign that the Liberals are leading in that riding, at least for the Liberals. We should watch the riding of Temiskaming in the northern part of the province because Remy Trudel, the NDP candidate there, has taken an early lead.
Yes, that's Temiskaming, as you say it in French,
right.
Because we've just seen Temiskaming in the province of Ontario, where McDougall, the Conservative, has the lead at this moment and is doing rather well. Thank you very much. We are going to take a look at how some of the ridings in Ontario are reporting in at this very early stage. CTV is projecting the re-election of Charles Ketcha, not much of a surprise there in Davenport, in Toronto area.
Not a big fan of Mr. Turner's, but he will be back. We'll see if Mr. Turner will.
Say there's one great race that everybody's paying a lot of attention to. No results from there yet, but Peter Murphy is down at the headquarters of Barbara McDougall in the riding of St. Paul's. That's the fight between Barbara McDougall and A.D. Nicholson. 3 women, that's right, yes.
There are 302 women candidates this time round, and there are 3 of them right in that one race.
Let's call in Peter and see what he has to say about... I see the balloons are up, not popped yet, though.
Well, it's a party atmosphere here, Lloyd. People were very confident. This is a bellwether riding, and Barbara McDougall is confident that she's going to take the riding back again, but she's bucking 2 trends. The Liberals are leading in Toronto in the polls just before the election was held. She's going to buck that. She's confident of bucking that. The other one is that this riding has never sent, in the past 20 years, an incumbent returned back to the House of Commons. So she's hoping she can reverse that trend. ran. The Conservatives had a phenomenally powerful campaign, a strong organization. Aideen Nicholson has come in from Trinity, the adjoining riding, which was dissolved in redistribution. Her campaign has been rather low-key. The NDP, Diane Bull, they've never been a factor, but what could happen in this election is that the NDP supporters might tactically vote. And if they do send their support behind the Liberals opposing free trade, it could be a tough, tight race. Lloyd?
Thank you, Peter. We've heard quite a lot about that strategic voting. Is that really happening? I mean, are people really going to do that?
Well, I'm sure we've seen from the last, the Liberal leader and the New Democratic Party leader in the last 48 hours asking people to stay with their own parties. But I think privately you're hearing from an awful lot of party people, listen, if you want to defeat the deal, you've got to pick your team. Here's Shefford, Jean Lapierre, who has been hot and cold so far as John Turner is concerned in the Liberal caucus, has a lead of 15 votes in his riding of Shefford. Here's Temiskaming. Remy Trudel of the NDP has the lead at the moment. 6 votes, 2 polls, but ever hopeful Jerry Kaplan. Lac Saint-Jean. Benoit Bouchard, no, I'm sorry, that's Lucien Bouchard. Lucien, yes. We have more Bouchards here that we can shake a stick at. Right. Lucien Bouchard is trailing at this moment. That's just with 1 poll. He's the Secretary of State. Champagne in Champlain has a 24-vote lead there.
Re-elected Andre Champagne.
Ah, we've re-elected. No, that's not Andre Champagne. That's the other Champagne. Saint-Jean, here again, the riding where Andre Bissonnette held sway. Dolbeck is still leading there, but again, it's just 1 poll. These are very early returns, and they're very scattered. Can't tell much from them at this stage. And a lot of the races in both Quebec and Ontario are going to be very tight. You have the phenomenon not only of the strategic voting, Lloyd, but the 3-way split. And we're going to see a lot of those races in Ontario where the support for the NDP, for example, might affect the outcome of the Liberal candidate. It works the other way around in some rural parts of Ontario. So there's a lot of factors coming into play. A lot of these races will be very tight. Now, this is probably in the computer and accounting for some of those numbers we're seeing there, but Pauline Browse in Scarborough Centre, the swing area, is in the lead there for the Tories. Just a few polls reporting, but Scarborough is considered always bellwether territory. We're just showing you on the bottom of our screen some of the elected members who will be in the next House of Commons. Your own member will probably pop up there during the course of the evening, and we will also be keeping at all times to the left of the screen, over my left shoulder usually, the elected and leading in this particular election. CTV coverage, Decision 88, continues shortly.
Good evening and welcome to CFTO's election coverage of Metro Toronto and Ontario. We have a host of reporters standing by live in the studio and in various locations around Metro, ready to bring you the results riding by riding. I'm Christine Bentley.
And I'm Ken Shaw. On the bottom of your screen, you see right now the national tote board that shows the PCs leading or elected now in 39 ridings, the Liberals leading or elected in 36, the NDP with 6. Now let's quickly go to take a look at what's going on right now in Metro, and we start off first with Paul Rogers.
And Metro East encompasses Scarborough ridings. Scarborough ridings are swing ridings. Please check your screen. You'll see that in Scarborough Centre, Pauline Brose is getting a challenge from Odysseus Katsitis. Brose, the incumbent there, with a 6-vote lead. In Scarborough Rouge River, Boswell, the incumbent Tory, losing now to Lee. That's Derek Lee, the Liberal. The environment was the big issue in Scarborough West, and that may be the problem there. That's only with 1 poll reporting. That's all we have at this point. Watching Metro East, I'm Paul Rogers.
Thanks, Paul. And now in Metro West with some results, here's Lynn Ilion.
154. Thanks, Chris. There are 11 ridings in Metro West in 1984. 5 of them went to the Liberals, 5 to the Tories, and 1 to the NDP. At least 1 is going to remain the same in Davenport. Charles Katcha, the Liberal incumbent, has been elected. At this point, he has a lead of about 16. And this result just in from Trinity Spadina, where Dan Heap for the NDP is the incumbent. There is an upset possibly in the works here. Tony Iano, the Liberal candidate, is in the lead. Dan Heap running a close second, so that will be an interesting race to watch. Okay, I'm Lynn Elioff.
And Bill Hutchison is tracking the ridings just outside the metro area. Bill?
And 168.
Thank you, Ken. Well, redistribution has affected all of the ridings surrounding Metro Toronto. A couple of new ridings created. In Oshawa, Ed Broadbent, the NDP leader, has already been re-elected. That's the check mark on the left side of your screen shows that he has been elected. York Simcoe, this is going to be a tight battle. John Cole started late because St. Clair Stevens was supposed to be the candidate for the PCs. He is leading Frank Stronach, the Liberal candidate at this point. We also have results from Brampton where John McDermott, the Minister of State for Housing, has been re-elected. That's the situation surrounding Metro Toronto right now. I'm Bill Hutchison.
Thanks, Bill. And now let's go to our political editor, Tom Clark.
Thank you, Chris. Well, one of the things that we're going to be looking at tonight is the popular vote. And if you've followed all these polls throughout this campaign, you'll know that those are the numbers we've been talking about now for the past 6 weeks. Let's take a look, first of all, at the Metro Toronto popular vote change. Now, I caution, there are not a lot of votes in so far, so we shouldn't take these numbers too seriously yet. But if these numbers hold up, it shows that, in fact, the Tories are gaining substantially more than the polls would have led us to believe. In Ontario right now, again, very few votes in at this point, but look at that, 35% PC and Liberal. Now, the polls were telling us something quite different, as, of course, were the Conservatives, saying that it was going to be a much bigger romp for the Conservatives tonight. But things are going to change. In the meantime, I want to introduce you to an old colleague of ours, Barry Dunsmore of ABC News, who's up here. Barry, good evening.
Well, nice to be here. Really nice to be here on what is really a very exciting evening.
Well, I was going to say, you've come through what many consider to be a dull election in the United States, a dirty one, but a dull one. Here you've got something entirely different. How much real interest is there in the United States in this election now?
Well, I mean, I really hate to sound condescending, but the truth of the matter is that this is not a compelling issue in the United States. And most Americans are not really even aware of the fact that there is an important issue here in terms of the U.S.-Canada trade agreement. I think we both know that one of the ways to get America's attention is either to storm the embassy or yell, "Yankee, go home." And in a sense, what this campaign has been kind of that. It's the functional equivalent of that. Canadians have been saying things that Americans just couldn't dream that Canadians might have said. So to that extent, there's a little attention, but as I say, it is not a compelling issue at this time in the States.
A slight bit of anti-Americanism in this campaign that you've been detecting?
Well, I personally don't perceive it as that, but I can certainly see that some Americans might when they see and hear the kinds of things that have been said during the campaign.
Barry, thanks very much. Please stick around. We'll get back to you later. Let's go back now to Ken Shaw and Christine Bentley.
Thank you, Tom. And new results in now in Metro West. Here's Lynn Elioff.
Thanks for watching Etobicoke North. We have just received some results there. Now, this is going to be quite a race to watch. Bob Pennock, the Tory incumbent, was first elected in '84. He beat out Roy McLaren in '84, and it is a close race right now. Pennock with a 9-vote lead over Roy McLaren. That could go either way. I'm Lynn Elioff.
Thanks, Lynn. And now in Metro East, Paul Rogers has some new results just in.
Two ridings to take a look at. Watch your screens. In Don Valley North, Barbara Green, a popular Metro candidate, former North York controller, with a strong lead over Sarkis Asadurian. And in Rosedale, where David Crombie retired earlier this year, David MacDonald, former Conservative ambassador to Ethiopia, way ahead of Bill Graham. We were expecting a major challenge from Graham, who's been campaigning ever since he lost it in 1984. It looks like that is not happening tonight. We'll keep watching. I'm Paul Rogers.
And Jennifer Ward is taking a look at what's going on in Central Ontario. Jennifer?
Thank you, Ken. Central Ontario is considered Tory country. There are some interesting races going on. In Parry Sound Muskoka, Stan Darling is ahead of Joanne Melchuk, but not by much. Also moving to... And Parry Sound Muskoka, by the way, has been a Tory seat since '57. Simcoe Centre, Doug Anderson, the incumbent, is ahead. Edna Anderson, is ahead in that riding, but again, not by a big lead. Jack Ramsey coming up close behind. And that's the way things are looking in Ontario. Right now, Central Ontario, I'm Jennifer Ward.
Thanks, Jennifer. And now looking at Northern Ontario, here's Kate Wheeler.
We're expecting a close race in Northern Ontario, but in Sault Ste. Marie, the Honourable James Kelleher, our Solicitor General, is trailing Steve Butland for the NDP by 16 votes, and it was expected to be a very close race. Kelleher won that seat in '84. Up until then, it had been an NDP reign. We'll give you a complete rundown of the results in Northern Ontario later this evening. Kate Wheeler reporting.
But first, Bill Hutchison has some new results to report from just outside Metro.
Thank you, Ken. In the riding of Burlington, Bill Kempling has held this riding since 1972, and he is leading James Smith of the Liberals and Jane Malkowicz of the NDP at this point, a 48-vote lead. In Durham, Ross Stevenson, the former Environment Minister, is leading Doug Moffat, another former MPP, and Mark Wilbur. We'll be watching that riding closely. Mississauga East, this has gone back and forth between the Liberals and the Tories since 1979, and Laurie K. Pallett of the PCs has the early lead. And that's the situation surrounding Metro Toronto. I'm Bill Hutchison.
Thanks, Bill. And now looking at Hamilton Niagara, Julie Roper.
We have a couple Tories trailing, and it is a surprise. Gerb Fretz is behind at this point in the race, as is Peter Peterson, who are both incumbents. That's all for now. I'm Julie Roper.
Thank you, Julie. Once again, you see the national standings on the board just below us. The PCs with 67 ridings where they are leading or elected. The Liberals 52. The NDP now leading or elected in 10. That's with 129 of the 295 ridings reported. And so as we take a look again quickly at some of the names of those who are leading or elected in the Metro Toronto area, Charles Casha, Barbara Green, Bob Pennock. I've just been told that Flora MacDonald is trailing. We'll rejoin the network now and return with our coverage of Toronto and regions.
On the half hour, polls have been closed for 30 minutes in Quebec and Ontario, 75 ridings in Quebec, 99 in Ontario, and things are beginning to shift around, as you can see. Conservatives elected and leading in 73 now, Liberals in 55, NDP in 9, as the story unfolds right across Canada on this historic night here on CTV.
CTV news coverage of the 34th general election continues. Decision 88. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Some early scattered returns from the province of Ontario and Quebec from various areas are showing that the Conservatives are gaining some ground. But the gains and losses chart shows us quite a story at this stage, because the Liberals made a lot of headway in the Atlantic region. Gained 12. And PCs lost 11. NDP lost 1. That was the one seat they held in St. John's.
And there you can see it showing up in the national popular vote figures. It's the Liberals who have got a 16-point gain in popular support. The Tories are down 8%, but they're running very close there, 44-41 in terms of popular support, splitting it just about evenly.
Here's Carlton Gloucester, Maureen McTeer's riding near Ottawa, and you can see there that she is in second place at this stage, but that's in the early returns. Belmare, a very popular local alderman, as a matter of fact, is leading. John Crosby is on the line, available to talk to us at this moment, I believe. Mr. Crosby, good evening.
Good evening.
Well, congratulations again on your re-election, sir, in St. John's, Minister of International Trade. But what happened to some of your fellows there in Newfoundland and the Maritime region?
Well, I'm afraid that the false stories about the free trade agreement, we didn't have enough time to get them corrected. The truth traveled too slowly, and that's, I think, what has caused the loss of 2 of our seats. This is particularly evident in our rural areas.
You had 2 years to get out your story, Mr. Crosby. Are you going to do a better job of it in Ontario and Quebec? Is that what you're hoping?
Well, we didn't have 2 years to correct the lies that commenced at the beginning of the campaign. And unfortunately, I believe that we gave 3 or 4 weeks away there where we weren't hitting hard enough about the false stories that were being spread to those people who need their old age pension, security, and the like. That was our problem. I don't think, however, that this is going to be the case as we travel across the country. After all, the results in Atlantic Canada reflect the polls that show that in Atlantic Canada the Liberals are having some success. The polls in the rest of the country are quite different, so I'm still quite optimistic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crosby. Perhaps you have reason to be, because as you're speaking to us, the chart is changing. The PCs are now up to leading and elected in 80, Liberal 57, NDP 10. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, we did take back an NDP seat, don't forget, in St. John's East, which is a great victory.
That's right. John Crosby, the Minister of International Trade. By the way, Marcel Masse, we are declaring elected in his riding of Frontenac in Quebec, the Minister of Energy. Now, we have a little chart that we'd like to bring forward for the first time. This is the House projection. This includes the Atlantic region results, predictions from reporters, an analysis of polls, and it shows us that at this stage the Conservatives can form a minority government, but they could also form a majority government. The magic number required for a majority is 148.
148 seats, and there you're seeing very close at the bottom. 144 seats is the absolute minimum. Our computers and our experts think the Conservatives will win tonight across the country. With that maximum projection sitting there, it's looking very good for them at this point. The Liberals, the numbers apply, the minimum number of seats 82, the maximum number 103 seats.
So it does show that the Liberals could still form a minority government if things pick up for them, but at this stage it looks, according to that chart, like a Conservative government. But remember, it's still pretty early, and things are just starting to flow in now from Quebec and Ontario, and we should know within the next 25 to 30 minutes, when we go back to that chart, just what's going to happen here, whether we have a minority government or a majority government. Sault Ste. Marie, Jim Kelleher running third place now. Not looking very good for him, the Solicitor General.
Very troubled race there, very, very tight race.
Carleton Gloucester, Belmare, the Liberal, still in the lead over Maureen McTeer, 291 votes. Belmare said he could take it, and the readings we were getting yesterday was that he was going to take it. Thunder Bay, Nipigon, up in the north. Camusi, the Liberal, is leading Ernie Epp of the NDP in Thunder Bay, Nipigon. And in St. Paul's riding, that big race, Nicholson is ahead of Barbara McDougall at this very early stage with 4 out of 195 polls reporting. No surprise here, we are declaring Sergio Markey, Liberal, re-elected in the riding of York West in Toronto with just 1 poll heard from. In Nipissing, Mo Mantha, PC trailing there by 49 votes. Mo Mantha was elected in a seat that had been held for years and years by Jean-Jacques Blais. It was a Liberal seat, and it may be returning to the fold, but Mantha nevertheless is a popular candidate. Here's Len Hopkins, Mike.
Len Hopkins only won this seat by a handful of votes in 1984. They say he goes to every birthday, every funeral. Len Hopkins, the consummate constituency man, appears to be re-elected tonight.
In Ottawa-Vanier, Jean-Robert Gauthier, we're declaring him re-elected for the Liberals. Not much of a surprise there, even though it is just 1 poll reporting, but it's enough, according to our computer, to say
it's been Liberal for 100 years. If it didn't go tonight.
Parry Sound Muskoka, Stan Darling, declared re-elected for the PCs.
He's the oldest member of Parliament. Bill Daum, also in Peterborough now. We're looking at him re-elected there. Very strong spokesman on the whole question of capital punishment.
Now, Sandeman of the NDP is considered a very good candidate, but not going to make it this time, apparently. CTV projects the re-election of the Minister of Supply and Services, Otto Jelinek, in his constituency of Oakville-Milton in Toronto. So that's how it looks at this stage as returns come in from Quebec and Ontario, and the Conservatives continue to edge upward. 96, changing as we go. Liberals, 66, NDP, 11. 173 out of 295 polls heard from at this stage. And Perrin Beattie is, we are declaring him elected in the riding of Wellington, Dufferin, Simcoe in Ontario. Not too many returns from there yet either, but apparently enough for our computer experts to declare him elected. And Michael Wilson, the Minister of Finance, is leading in his riding of Etobicoke Centre in Ontario. Barbara McDougall is trailing. Doug Lewis up in Simcoe, we are declaring him elected. Doug Lewis, the House Leader for the Conservatives, and Jim Kelleher, as we've concentrated, as we've said before, is trailing up in the Sioux. There's the chart showing Doug Lewis, the House Leader for the Conservatives, re-elected in Simcoe North.
A bitter campaign up there. Alan Martin, a former Liberal MP from Toronto, moved up to that area and fought a very tight battle against Doug Lewis, but didn't win, obviously.
Mike, Pam, we'll be back in a moment. Decision 88 results will continue after this. CTV News is projecting at this time a Conservative majority government. The re-election of Brian Mulroney. Brian Mulroney becomes the first leader since Louis Saint Laurent did it in 1953 to win back-to-back majorities, and indeed the first Conservative leader to win a second majority government since Sir John A. Macdonald managed to accomplish it in 1891. So it's a majority Conservative government declared now at this hour, coming up to 8:40 as we come through the returns of the province of Ontario. And this is what we're looking at. There is no way now that the Conservatives can drop below a majority, Pamela. They're going to win a minimum of 152 seats, according to this chart, and 148 is all that's required for a majority. They could get up as high as 172. There sit the Liberals with a minimum of 83 and a maximum of about 102. So it's a Conservative majority government at this stage. The screen at the bottom of your screen, you see at this stage the Conservatives leading by 104. Here's the national popular vote.
This is where you start to get because we've heard from so many Atlantic regions where the Liberals did very well. So when you're looking at the popular vote change, the Liberals have gained 14 points. But if you look at the left-hand side where you see the Conservatives and the Liberals very close together in terms of the popular vote, very hard not to form a government if the Conservatives have 41% popular vote and the seats are splitting in their favor.
The place to go now is Baie-Comeau, right? Up to Brian Mulroney's headquarters where Craig Oliver is standing by. He's been traveling with the Prime Minister time after time during this campaign. He was saying to us yesterday that there is no doubt, so far as the Conservatives up there are concerned, that they've got it in the bag. Here is the Mulroney headquarters in Baie-Comeau. We can't see Craig at this moment, but we may be hearing from him very shortly. You see the celebration underway at Conservative headquarters, and we're now going to Vancouver Quadro. We're going to flash out there to Alan Fryer. Alan Fryer, come on in.
Lloyd, it's obviously going to be devastating news for Mr. Turner. I think he truly believed that he'd be able to hold the Conservatives to a minority government. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. For the past couple of hours, he's been closeted in his hotel room, going over speeches, various scenarios. Obviously, now he's going to have to address this one. And the question now becomes, what of John Turner? Is he going to resign? Is he going to fight to stay on? I'm told by senior Liberals that he has in fact made that decision, but it's a decision known only to himself and to his family and perhaps a couple of his senior aides. I'm also told it is not likely that he is going to announce that decision tonight.
Craig Oliver is also up sharing the screen with you now, Alan, so we're going to give him a shot at this because the celebration has started up in Baie-Comeau, as you might imagine. Craig, come in.
Expected. They haven't had any doubts. They've been saying that they knew they had a majority for the last 10 days. The question was how big a majority it will be. They're still predicting they will get as many as 180 seats before this night is over. This place is beginning to crowd up. The Prime Minister is expected to come here to the hockey arena in Baie-Comeau sometime after 11:30 to make some kind of an announcement. There will be a Sonne Lumiere show first. There are about 1,500 people here now, but they're saying there will be 3,000 before the night's over. The Prime Minister's people say his first priority will be to call Parliament back on or around the 12th or 14th of December, and he will then shove through the House of Commons the free trade bill. He'll also bring childcare around, and he will probably also meet with the American president within the next 2 or 3 months. Some people say he may even deal with the president-elect. At least that has been one idea they've considered. But for sure they will meet with the president sometime probably in March at the very latest. Lloyd?
Craig, this is quite an accomplishment for Brian Mulroney. Back-to-back majorities, as we said, for the first time for any government since 1953. He had to pull it out of the bag at the end when things weren't looking so good, halfway through the campaign. And now you traveled with him all the way through. Did there ever seem to be any nervous moments, any doubt? What was it that carried them at the end? Was it the organization, the strong Tory organization?
Well, I think that there were some bad moments. The Conservative Army, an efficient, rather cold-blooded army, was put into some confusion after the debates. They weren't quite sure how to respond. Their own polls showed them slipping down. But the army swung around and brought their artillery to bear and launched that Pitbull campaign, which I think was very effective in focusing people's attention on the charges that were being made about the free trade bill. And that, they think, was the turning point in this campaign for them. The Prime Minister campaigned very, very strongly. One of the things he used effectively was his personal strength in Quebec and the strength of his party there and the message to the rest of the country that they wanted a unified country, they should vote PC.
Is that where the turnaround really came, Craig, in Quebec?
Well, it came in Quebec probably more than anyone else because the Prime Minister was able to show that he was still strong in Quebec that Quebec wanted this free trade bill, that Meech Lake was a very important part of the future of the country, and I think he was able to pull in a lot of votes from the rest of the country with the idea of the unity platform he's been pushing so hard in this last week or so.
Craig, thank you very much. We'll be back to you several times during the course of the next few hours, obviously, as the party picks up there in Baie-Comeau, Mulroney headquarters. We have someone here at the desk who has a broad smile on her face right now. Pat Carney, who was in for all those negotiations, those many hours on the free trade deal. Pat, is it time to say congratulations? Free trade is now a fact of life in Canada.
Well, that is a big relief, but I also want to say how exciting it has been for me as a British Columbian to actually see a national election. I don't think you know how frustrating it is for people on the coast who never, ever get to see the kind of races.
Do you want to hear from Jack Webster? Because Jack Webster is plugged in, I think.
Jack will say that, but I mean, normally what we get is a click of the television and we get told who the government is, and I'm glad tonight that they'll get told that the Conservatives are going to get a majority, but I personally have enjoyed actually being able to watch the seat-by-seat struggle. I do feel that it is, for the Conservatives, an enormous relief that we will be able to go ahead with the free trade agreement.
Your friend Jack Webster wants to say something to you. As a matter of fact, we have him on the line here from Vancouver. Say hello to Pat, Jack.
No, I'll say more than hello to Pat. I wish she was still in the House, because she would pass my private bill, which would insist that on election day all the results are sealed and then opened at the same equal time across the country the next day. Because once again, here we are in a position when we go live to the public at 8 o'clock, when they'll tell us from the dear old East, the election is over, wrap up the odds and ends, please. But the odds and ends on this occasion may decide some self-respect for the NDP. The Liberals, I doubt, will get 2 seats, and the Tories, I think, will lose some seats. Anyway, we in the West Coast shall decide the size of the NDP opposition and the Tory majority.
Thank you very much, Jack. We'll be back to you. Don't go away, you and your guests out there. Pat Carney is still with us, and she will sit in the chair here for a few moments. Martin Goldfarb is standing by. Right now, though, we want to show you some of the vote from Ontario.
This is a very interesting development.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Can this be true? Something that's more important than what you see on the screen. Flora MacDonald is trailing, and indeed, this may be an upset. We'd better confirm this. She is defeated. There we are. Flora MacDonald defeated in Kingston and the Islands by Milliken, the Liberal. And it doesn't come as a total surprise, because people were saying she was going to be in a fight. But this may be why, in some sense, Pamela, that popular vote.
We're seeing the popular vote go down 11 points for the Conservatives in this province over 1984, and they are going to lose some high-profile people like Flora MacDonald if those kinds of dips in the popular support continue.
The story, though, is that they held on in Quebec, and indeed they gained.
There's the support, backup, and they will keep their cabinet ministers, a lot of them. Save the Montreal Island. We'll look at a couple of tight races there.
Let's have a quick comment from Martin Goldfarb about what's happening. Quebec, the PC vote increasing. Ontario, obviously some trouble when you see people like Flora MacDonald being defeated.
The PCs were able to hold Quebec fundamentally because they linked free trade and Meech Lake. If you voted against free trade, in essence, what the PCs were saying is you were against Meech Lake. That destroyed the Liberals in Quebec. In Ontario, the Liberals had to have a 10-point popular vote lead to come out of Ontario with enough seats to match the momentum that the Tories had in Quebec. They didn't.
Thank you very much, Martin. Stay right in the chair, because we'll be back to you later along with Pat Carney as our coverage will continue. This is Decision 88 on CTV.
And welcome back to CFTO's coverage of Toronto and Ontario ridings. Right off the bat, a couple of notable Ontario upsets. Flora MacDonald has been defeated in Kingston Islands riding. Maureen McTeer, who is making a challenge in Carleton, Gloucester, which is a brand new riding just outside Ottawa, has also been defeated in her bid to be an MP.
If we look at the board at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the Tories are leading or elected in 109 ridings, the Liberals in 76, and the NDP in 11, and that's with a total of 196 ridings reporting out of 295. Taking a look now at Metro West, here is Lynn Elioff.
Thanks, Christine. We're watching 11 ridings in Metro West. In 5 of them, we have elected candidates. In Davenport, no surprise here, this has been Charles Ketch's riding for the past 20 years. It will remain so. In Eglinton Lawrence, this riding has voted Liberal throughout its 10-year history. There's no incumbent here, but Joe Volpe for the Liberals is in the lead. In Etobicoke Centre, no surprise here, Michael Wilson, the finance minister, has been elected. In Etobicoke Lakeshore, Patrick Boyer, the Tory incumbent, is in the lead. This is the only riding in the country without a Liberal candidate. In Etobicoke North, Roy McLaren has defeated Bob Pennock, the Tory incumbent. That is an upset. In Parkdale High Park, another potential upset here. Jesse Fliss, who lost in '84 to Andrew Witter, is in the lead. In St. Paul's, Aideen Nicholson, the Liberal incumbent from the old riding of Trinity, is in the lead over Barbara McDougall, who is the Tory incumbent in that riding. Quite a battle going on there. In Trinity Spadina, another possible upset here. Dan Heap, the NDP incumbent, sitting in second place to Tony Ianu, a political advisor. He works for Premier Peterson. In York Centre, Bob Kaplan has been elected. He was first elected in '68. In York South-Weston, another elected candidate, John Nunziata for the Liberals, a member of the Rat Pack, a former City of York alderman. In York West, Sergio Marchi, first elected in '84. He was a former North York alderman. Watching Metro West, I'm Lynn Elioff.
And watching Metro East with some real tight races, here's Paul Rogers.
Some of the best races of the night, I think. In the Beaches Woodbine, Neil Young stumbled in the early going. He's regained his feet now. The incumbent New Democrat there in the lead with in the lead by 133 votes. Broadview Greenwood, Dennis Mills, the parachuted Liberal, is giving Lynn McDonald, the NDP critic, a run for her money. He leads now with 287 votes. As you can see by the check mark, our computer has elected Alan Redway, former East York mayor in Don Valley East. And Barbara Green has been elected in Don Valley North. Barbara Green, the former North York controller and Metro councillor. To Don Valley West, where John Bosley, no surprise there, former House Speaker John Bosley, elected for the Tories in Don Valley West. And in Rosedale, David McDonald parachuted into Rosedale after the retirement of David Crombie, elected in Rosedale, defeating Bill Graham. Scarborough Agincourt, Jim Karajanis may upset Paul McCrossan, the Tory incumbent. He has a 63-vote lead there with 65 polls reporting in. To Scarborough Centre, Odysseus Katsitis, that should be, leading Pauline Browse. That's still in the early going with 55 polls reporting. To Scarborough East, Bob Hicks of the Progressive Conservatives, the incumbent there. He's holding on to that seat over Betty Febro of the Liberals. Scarborough Rouge River, Raymond Lee. We have now elected him. There's an upset over Boswell. And Reg Stackhouse is in trouble in what could be the closest race in Ontario tonight. Reg Stackhouse losing now to Tom Wappel of the Liberals. In Willowdale, Jim Peterson, the Premier of Ontario's brother, is leading incumbent John Oostrom. This has been a vicious battle. This has been a very exciting fight, and that's the one we're going to watch for you tonight. Watching Metro East, I'm Paul Rogers.
Thanks, Paul. And watching some of the ridings neighboring Metro, here's Bill Hutchison.
Thank you, Chris. Well, a couple of cabinet ministers have been re-elected in the ridings just outside of Metro. In Brampton, Malton, a new riding here. Harry Chadwick with nearly a 600-vote lead over Gurjeet Grewal at this point. In Durham, Ross Stevenson, the former provincial environment minister, he has been elected. The check mark on the left of your screen denotes that. In Halton Peel, another new riding. Garth Turner, the business columnist and editor with the Toronto Sun, he has been elected. Albina Gardnieri has the lead, a 95-vote lead, very slim over Laurie Pallett in Mississauga East. This has gone back and forth. Don Blencar, no trouble holding on to Mississauga South. He's held on to that since 1984. Northumberland, this riding had gone Tory since Confederation. It looks like it is going to be a tight race for Reg Jewell to hang on to that riding. York North is up for grabs. Mike O'Brien has the lead at this point, very slim lead over Maurizio Bevilacqua. In York Simcoe, John Cole has the lead. This has gone back and forth between him and Frank Stronach. This is about as far apart as they have been all evening. John McDermott, the Minister of State for Housing, as we have told you, has been re-elected in Brampton. In Burlington, Bill Kempling, who's held that riding since 1972, he holds on to that riding once again. In Markham, Bill Atwell moved up from Don Valley riding to sit in Markham. He has captured that seat. In Oakville, Milton, no surprise, Otto Jelinek, The Minister of Supply and Services has held on to that riding. In Ontario, Rennie Soutens has taken over. Scott Fennell used to hold that riding. Rennie Soutens defeating John Roberts, the Liberal candidate. In Oshawa, of course, NDP leader Ed Broadbent has been victorious as well. Taking a look at the ridings just outside of Metro Toronto, I'm Bill Hutchison.
And National Editor Tom Clark has been doing some number crunching. And Thomas, as you take a look at what's happening in Metro Toronto, Liberals have gained 2 seats and the PCs have lost 2 seats at this point. And how do things go with the popular vote? How does all of that relate?
Well, Ken, it's very interesting, and I think we've got a slate that shows us the Ontario popular vote. It is very close, 38.7 for the Liberals, 37.1 for the Conservatives. What's interesting about that is both the public polls and the private predictions by the parties themselves had a much wider split than that. Basically, what we're seeing here tonight, Ken, is a much closer race, at least on the popular vote, than we expected. In Ontario, for example, the party standings right now, 45 PC, 42 Liberal. That is much better than the Tories expected to do, and needless to say, much worse than the Liberals thought they would do.
But some awful close races and some surprises with Flora MacDonald being defeated in Kingston and the Islands.
Well, that's right, and I think that part of what we're seeing in this popular vote, because it is so close, and certainly much closer than it was in '84, is that we're seeing a lot of the top profile Conservatives going down to defeat, Flora MacDonald being one of them, but there are others. John Oostrom in Willowdale is presumably going down to defeat tonight as well. So I think that the other thing we have to watch for in this, and this is something to look for in the national trend as we go throughout the evening, is take a look at the popular vote, because although the Liberals right now nationally have a higher popular vote than the Conservatives have got more seats. Now, what does that mean at the end of the night? The Liberals have more of a popular vote than the Conservatives do, or the Liberals and NDP together. Does that mean that the Senate may block it again? Back to you, Ken.
Well, one popular Conservative that has just gone down to defeat is James Kelleher, the Solicitor General. And Decision 88 continues after these messages.
Picture at this hour, 8 o'clock, Manitoba, Saskatchewan time. 20 minutes ago, CTV News projected a Conservative majority government. So Brian Mulroney wins a second term. The ride has not been easy for him, though. It didn't really start happening for the Conservatives until they got into the province of Quebec. And there are the party standings as of now. Conservatives elected and leading in 112, Liberal 78, NDP 11. However, we project that the Conservatives will manage to capture well over the 148 seats required for majority government. The Liberals did well in the Maritimes, but when returns started coming in from the new Conservative stronghold in Quebec, it became apparent very quickly that the Liberal lead in the Atlantic region could not hold. And that's how it stands at this stage as we continue our election night coverage, 1988, right across the country on this dramatic evening here on CTV.
From the CTV News Election Center in Toronto, Decision 88. Reported by Pamela Wallen, Mike Duffy, Nancy Wilson, and Lloyd Robertson.
And we now welcome those viewers just joining us in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. 14 seats available in Manitoba, more in Saskatchewan. And we are now going to go through some pictures which show you in a brief way just what happened tonight as polls opened first in Newfoundland at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. And now we have them open in Manitoba. In St. John's West, very early, we projected the election of John Crosbie, the Minister of International Trade. In Grand Falls, Gander, we projected the election of George Baker, a prominent Liberal, very quickly.
And colorful. Stu McInnes defeated a cabinet minister in Halifax in a bellwether riding.
One of 3 cabinet ministers who went down to defeat. However, we are projecting the re-election of the Minister of Energy, Marcel Masse, in Quebec, and Sheila Finestone, Pierre Trudeau's old riding of Mount Royal and Montreal, re-elected easily. CTV projects the re-election of another prominent Liberal, Warren Almond, in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, and Benoit Bouchard, the Minister of Transport, re-elected easily in Roberval tonight. So that's how it stands, but there is a lot more to tell. One of those stories is that Maureen McTeer, wife of External Affairs Minister Joe Clark, has gone down to defeat in Carleton Gloucester in Ottawa. Now, let's take a look at this projection chart of ours, which includes all of the returns up to this stage, as well as reporters' predictions and a summary of the polls. And it indicates here that the Conservatives have an easy majority government. 159 is the least they could capture. 175 would be their maximum, and it's 148 required for a majority.
So that settles it in a way. You can't get any lower than 159 on those charts. So we're going to be watching this, of course, as the results in Ontario and Quebec are really going to provide the mass of seats in support because, of course, that's where the most of the seats are and most of the people in this country. So we will see those races come in throughout the course of the evening.
We also want to introduce an old friend of all of us to the people of Manitoba and Saskatchewan who are coming on stream now. Mike Duffy. Mike, delighted to have you with us
Lloyd,
on our
it's
CTV
great,
coverage.
It's great to be here with all of you on this exciting and historic night. You know, Manitoba and Saskatchewan are going to provide us with some exciting races as well, I'm sure. Will the Liberals break through in Winnipeg? Will the NDP be able to hold on? What are we going to see in Saskatchewan? Those provinces of Manitoba and Saskatchewan are going to give us some exciting races and keep the momentum going, even though we know now it's going to be a majority Conservative government.
We were talking, Mike, about the number of cabinet ministers who were in trouble. One defeated. Tom McMillan is trailing in his riding in Hillsborough. Three defeated totally, right? Jim Kelleher in the Sioux. And
Flora McDonald
in Kingston and the Islands.
And
That's
Stu
right.
McGuinness in Halifax.
And Stu McGuinness in Halifax.
And Tom McMillan, the Environment Minister, has been trailing all night in Charlottetown.
Right. So some Tory cabinet ministers in trouble. So it hasn't been altogether an easy romp for them, but it was that bastion in Quebec that Brian Mulroney has now firmly captured that has done it for them. We have some things to look at.
Tom McMillan has just been defeated just now.
Ah, okay. Mike
So
has it from his private source. being the Prince Edward Island boy, you have
checking back home, my schoolmate Tom McMillan, it now makes 4 of the Mulroney government's cabinet ministers have gone down to defeat tonight.
All right, so the Minister of the Environment down to defeat. Now, on a night such as this, when one of the most important elections in Canadian history is being played out, we have quite a few people to introduce you to, but first of all, we want to show you the story on the gains and losses chart. There it is. The Liberals have gained a total of 29, and the Conservatives have lost a total of 29.
You just have to remember back to that huge majority in '84. They can withstand those losses. Here we see the popular vote up across the country for the Liberals, 11 points. But when you look on the left-hand side, you see how tight the race is, 39-41. And with, I think, as Michael Kirby was saying, the free trade vote being split, the seats are breaking in favor of the Conservatives. Atlantic Canada there, where the Liberals did very, very well, up 11 points. Conservatives down 10.
So the question is, here we are with, no, this is the one we just talked about, yes, Hillsborough in Prince Edward Island, in the city of Charlottetown. Tom McMillan, the Minister of the Environment, defeated. And you had a reason for that earlier, Mike.
Yes, Lloyd. David Wheel, who is an independent running there, picked up 380 votes. His whole campaign was against the fixed link, the causeway, between PEI and New Brunswick. Tom McMillan supported the causeway. It's possible that a lot of that anti-causeway vote which would normally be Conservative, went away from Tom McMillan, and that stand on the causeway may have been the thing that cost him his seat here tonight.
We just had a brief glimpse there of the Quebec Popular Vote Board, and that told a story.
Very, very interesting numbers there, because you can see that the popular vote for the Conservatives is going up, even beyond what they had in 1984, where they captured 58 seats. So you can see that we're headed for a fairly blue sweep through the province of Quebec tonight.
The question is, what has happened in Montreal? We see there that many of the popular Liberals in that territory have been returned to office, including people like Marcel Prudhomme, who has held that riding of Saint-Denis since 1964. There's what you were talking about.
Yes, the Quebec numbers in general, the Conservatives up 5 points over where they were in 1984. So that's accounting for some of their gains, certainly in the rural areas, but there's so many tight races in Montreal, and we're not getting a lot of those results right now. We've got popular vote figures here. Oh, well, here's a very interesting race where Phil Edmonston, the star NDP candidate, was running and did not make it.
Richard Griset, as expected, re-elected there in Chambly, but a good run by Edmonston, as it turned out. That really did turn out to be, for a while, a close three-way race.
Indeed.
Here is Lévis, another prominent NDPer, Jean-Paul Harney, defeated, running third there. Fontaine, re-elected for the PCs.
Fontaine is a virulent anti-New Democrat, and he attacked the NDP in the House of Commons virtually every day in French, knowing that Jean-Paul Harney, who's known to people in Scarborough as John Harney, he's fluently bilingual, was going to run against him. And so it's been a 2-year campaign every day in the House against the NDP.
I don't know whether we've said this yet, but we have re-elected quite easily NDP leader Ed Broadbent in his home territory.
Yes, indeed. We did make reference to that. No surprise, I wouldn't think.
Not for our new viewers in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, though. Craig Oliver up in Baie-Comeau has Michelle Cogger with him. Craig, go ahead.
Well, I should explain who Michelle Cogger is. Not only
Indeed.
is he national co-chairman, Lloyd, of the Prime Minister's campaign, but more than that, he is one of the Prime Minister's oldest friends. I think you've probably known the Prime Minister, Michelle, about as long as his mother has. Now, what did he say when we announced tonight, and others did, but us first, that he had been re-elected as Prime Minister?
Well, indeed, he was absolutely delighted and ecstatic. He's with his family and friends over at the Manoir. He'll be coming here later. But clearly, everybody is absolutely in a great mood.
At what point in this campaign do you think you were pretty sure you had won this election, Michelle?
Oh, not till the very end. As you know, it was the only one I can ever remember that sort of started off on a high, then reversed itself, went into a rather low period, and then we worked our way up again.
Tell me about the role of Quebec. You've been a Quebec conservative in the days when people thought you were crazy to be a conservative in this province. No one ever thought you'd go anywhere in that party. What's happening here that's new and different?
Well, I think what this current election tonight is showing in an interesting fashion is that 1984 was not a fluke. We are there to stay. We have begun to grow roots. And 1988 is confirming that with a vengeance.
Do you think your strong support in Quebec helped you in campaigning in the rest of the country?
Well, clearly, it's very important to have a base. Now, by the time the results from the prairies come in, it'll be easier to analyze as a nation. But clearly, as I say, it's nice to campaign from a strong regional base, and that's what we had in Quebec.
Do you think the Prime Minister will have any trouble at all getting through free trade now, and will he get to that fast?
Well, I think he indicated not too long ago it was his intent to recall Parliament soon and deal with it, and with the numbers that we see on your screen now, it seems that he'll have no problem at all.
Thanks, good luck.
Thank you,
congratulations. Lloyd?
Thank you, Craig. If you watch us all evening, you'll see your local member's name appear on the bottom of the screen. We've just seen two flash by there. Herb Gray, elected down in Windsor, and John McDermott, the Minister of Housing, re-elected in Brampton in his home riding. And this one, the race. Barbara McDougall, we declare re-elected in the riding of St. Paul's in Toronto. And
that was Hugh Siegel. You can hear cheering in the background.
Yeah, indeed. What a race that has been. Captured the imagination and the interest of the country. And it seems that Barbara McDougall has, well, obviously she has now pulled it
A
off.
serious loss for the Liberal Party. Dean Nicholson, a longtime MP who had to move into that riding to run, and she's lost.
We're going there right now, as a matter of
Okay.
fact, because Peter Murphy, I believe, has Barbara McDougall at the microphone. Peter, can you come in from her riding headquarters?
14,900.
She's not there. Well, it was an enthusiastic try, I'll tell you.
Well, there's a parallel here tonight, Lloyd. This is the first time in 35 years we've seen two majority governments elected back to back, and this is the first time St. Paul's has sent the same member back in over 20 years. So there's a symmetry.
Right, and A.D. Nicholson had, well, she didn't have to go and run there, but she wanted to go and run there, but her riding of Trinity was wiped out,
Right.
making a real contest because Diane Bull, the NDPer,
No
was a
slouch
terrific
either.
candidate
No,
too.
absolutely.
More CTV News election night coverage right after this. Sir, and that is that in the riding of York Simcoe in Toronto, where Sinclair Stevens was the member for many, many years, John Cole, his successor, has been elected. We are declaring John Cole, the optometrist, elected. Frank Stronach, the high-profile Liberal and president of Magna Corporation, defeated. I'm glad to have the panel cheering. You know, the Liberals and the NDP are allowed to cheer as well. You know?
Everybody is cheering.
No decorum here. No decorum.
That's Hugh Siegel's whistle piercing the air here. All right, let's look at some ridings from, I think we have some from the province of Manitoba just coming in now. Churchill, Rod Murphy of the NDP, trailing at this moment.
Very small poll, that one. Saskatoon, this is an interesting rate because you have two incumbent members of Parliament because of redistribution. They lost their ridings. Don Ravis falling behind Stan Hovdebo there.
All right, Stan Hovdebo, of course, held a riding up in Prince Albert for a couple of years there. The old riding of John Diefenbaker, and we haven't heard anything from there yet, but we know that a popular former morning man called the Wake Up, Shake Up Man from Prince Albert is running there. We'll see what happens to him. We have some word on Don Johnson. All right, let's have a look. Or what am I being told?
I think Don Johnson is there with us.
Ah, there he is. All
There he
right,
is.
all right. We've been waiting for you, Don, to show up on the
Well, I've been
screen.
waiting
Finally,
for
we've
you.
got you. Okay. Don Johnson, the former member of Parliament, of course, from St. Andre Westmount. How is it looking in Montreal, Don? Do you have any indication of the way things are going there? We see the Liberals holding
the results
firm.
that we've seen locally have pretty much followed predictions. I haven't seen them from all the local ridings, but we're getting some of our very good members back. Paul Martin's been declared elected in La Salle-et-Mar, and it seems to be going very much in accordance with the predictions, except your prediction of 14 to 23, of course, would be a major disappointment. I think the Liberals expected at least 25 and hopefully more in the province as a whole.
What do you think about the free trade issue in the province? We seem to see it turn around in the final days of the campaign, Don. Is that what is hurting the Liberals in Quebec, or is it really just that there was going to be a blue tide, that, as Marty Goldfarb has said, the issues of Meech Lake and free trade were inextricably linked?
Well, I suppose so. Of course, I'm one of the people in the country who's against Meech Lake and for free trade. There's no party in that position. But in this particular campaign, I think that Mr. Bourassa undoubtedly has had some influence. The Liberal Party has not had the support that it would expect from the provincial party. Mr. Bourassa in recent weeks, has been campaigning vigorously on behalf of the free trade deal, and I'm sure that's had some impact in the province.
Is there any kind of moral victory for John Turner in at least the strong showing so far in Atlantic Canada?
Well, I think so. I mean, look, this has fallen far short of what Liberals had hoped for several weeks ago, but compare it to the early going in the campaign when there was talk of the Liberals falling to third place, the Liberals going into oblivion and so on. Put on that basis, this has been remarkable given where the Liberals started at the outset.
Thank you very much, Don Johnson, for dropping into a studio there in Montreal for us tonight. We appreciate that very much. And Paul Martin, we may have mentioned this before, although I can't recall. We are declaring him elected in La Salle-et-Mar in Montreal, and Claude Lantier defeated the Conservative candidate there. We are also declaring elected at this stage Ian Angus for the NDP up in Thunder Bay, Atikokan, and here comes the first return from Manitoba of a cabinet minister, Jacob, Minister of Health, re-elected in Provencher. In Nunatsiaq, the first return from far up in the north, the eastern Arctic, Brian Pearson, who for many years was the mayor of Frobisher Bay, is leading up there. In Prince Albert Churchill River, this one, that's the fellow I was telling you about, the wake-up, shake-up man, the morning man. Senan is running third there now. Ray Funk for the NDP has the lead. Regina Cabell, Simone de Young of the NDP seems to be romping home easily. And in Provencher, there's a look at the chart just to show you how well Jacob is doing at this stage. So Jacob, Minister of Health, elected.
Don Johnson talking about the free trade issue, and it's been interesting to see that in the prairies as well.
Here's Ed Broadbent's headquarters in Oshawa.
Ed Broadbent has just arrived, Lloyd. We're asking him about his future. He says he hasn't made up his mind yet. We'll see if we can't get some kind of a comment from him. Mr. Broadbent, when will you be making up your mind, sir?
When we get results in.
Well, it looks like it's a Conservative majority. Will you be reassessing?
Later, folks. Maybe we can get in the hall.
Why don't we just listen up a little Ed Broadbent is going into the hall here at Oshawa. He'll be thanking his party supporters for getting him reelected here. He's about 3,000 votes ahead, and there's no question he's going to be reelected. The question, of course, is what's he going to do tomorrow? He and his wife, Lucille, are expected to take a long ride. We'll see if he has anything more to say.
Getting downright dangerous there. There's Ed Broadbent. Now we can finally see the leader of the NDP.
This is one of the delights. This is one of the delights of election night, watching this sort of thing happen to reporters, isn't it? The public loves it, I'm sure.
I think we deserve danger pay when we're doing that. Ed Broadbent traditionally has his election night rally at the Auto Workers Hall. These are the people who supported him initially when he ran and won, I think, by 8 votes. And so he goes back there every time. It's a tradition in Oshawa.
Ed Broadbent approaching the stage in Oshawa. We will be picking up Ed Broadbent. We're just going to take a break here for a moment, but we will be coming back.
He's got a ways to go to the stage yet.
This is Decision 88 on CTV.
Here's
Ed Broadbent, NDP leader, re-elected easily in his home riding of Oshawa. This is a statement he's making to his local workers. We should point that out and underline it because we imagine that we'll be hearing Ed Broadbent in a more formal statement to the nation a little later, but this is Ed with the folks who have helped him so many years in Oshawa.
Thank you very much for doing the hard work that's necessary to, as one says, bring home the bacon. Thank you very much indeed. Je n'ai pas l'intention de faire des observations concernant les résultats nationaux. Maintenant, nous allons voir les résultats dans l'Ouest bientôt.
He's just saying, Lloyd, that we've only got part of the results. We're still waiting for the results from Western Canada. We'll get them in a short while.
Les résultats pour le Canada.
And then we'll know the results for all of
Canada. I conclude by saying I will, of course, be back here later tonight to have more to say about the national results. I wanted very much to be here with you at this early stage to thank you for the work that has been done here in my community. I simply will conclude with this note. Do watch indeed the results as they come in from west of the Ontario border. Thank you very much.
A couple of notes there as we leave Ed Broadbent's headquarters. Walter McLean re-elected in Waterloo, and there's McDougall re-elected in Temiskaming, as a matter of fact, and Steve Butland for the NDP elected in Sault Ste. Marie, which signals the defeat of the Solicitor General James Kelleher.
And Jim Peterson, the brother of the Premier of Ontario, elected in Ontario.
And with 217 out of 295 ridings heard from, it's PCs 125, Liberals 75, NDP 19. And while we are talking NDP and Quebec, the NDP notables in Quebec have not done well tonight. Paul Vachon, the wrestler, defeated. Edmundston, the consumer advocate, defeated. Pierre Etu, the orchestral conductor, defeated. And Jean-Paul Harney, defeated. So it seems there will be no NDP breakthrough in Quebec at this stage. Here's some more some more results from the Manitoba ridings. Dauphin Swan River, White PC, trailing there. Winnipeg North Centre, Cyril Keeper is behind Walker of the Liberals, and Stephen Lewis is sitting behind me and shaking his head saying, this can't happen.
This is exactly
That's Stanley Knowles' old riding.
That's right. Now look at this.
J.S. Woodsworth.
The J.S. Woodsworth, right. Saskatoon Clark's Crossing, Rain Etition is running at this moment second behind an NDPer by the name of Axworthy.
Not to be confused with Lloyd.
Not to be confused with Lloyd, that's right. But that's with only one poll heard from. So these are scattered results very, very early at this stage. And we have beside us, if we could talk to them for a moment here, Stephen Lewis, former ambassador to the United Nations, leader of the NDP in Ontario, and an old friend, Iona Campanola. President of the Liberal Party, riding of Skeena, representative for many, many years. Good to have you with us.
Delighted to be with you on this very exciting campaign.
Well, tell me, what were you thinking when it was rolling along in the Atlantic region
Well, if
tonight?
I dare tell you, I was thinking 3 good women from the Atlantic in the Atlantic Caucus, and what a difference we'll make. They're all Liberals. Catherine Colbeck from PEI and Mary Clancy from Halifax, and my old colleague Colleen Campbell back in the House where she belongs. That's very nice to see. And of course, the sadness at losing both Aideen Nicholson and Flora MacDonald. 2 good women out, 3 good women in.
What are you seeing now as we're heading into Manitoba, Iona, where the Liberals are hoping to make some breakthroughs there at the expense of your friend Stephen Lewis?
Well, I'll tell you, I ran into the main reporter the other day for USA Today. I was in British Columbia, and I said, well, where are you going to go and watch the election? He said, Winnipeg, because you Liberals are going to take 9 seats there. I thought, well, if the U.S. thinks we're going to take 9 seats in Winnipeg, that's fine with me.
They're always hyperbolic.
He was also betting on Dukakis.
Right.
Yes. Well, I don't think we've talked about what kind of an influence the American election has had on this campaign.
No,
it's a little early yet to see what it is, but I do hope that the terribly negative nature of this campaign isn't going to be the model for the future, or we're going to drive good people out of politics.
Stephen Lewis, what do you have a comment on that, an idea on that? There's been a lot of debate about whether or not we just got too down and dirty this time.
We got too down and dirty. We went too far. It was not good for Canadian political life. It was not healthy. There may come an end to it. You know, one of the things that is happening tonight is a very, very significantly strengthened political opposition and a much weakened government, albeit a majority, and it will make for a healthier politics over the next 4 years.
But didn't we face the issues head on? Didn't we, for the first time In 74, wage and price controls. In 79, the 18-cent gas tax. Haven't we, for the first time in this election, embraced an issue, head-to-head, first time since conscription, and said, let the chips fall where they may? Isn't that a mature political process? It may be negative, it may be dirty, but isn't it facing the issues rather than going through with generalities and talking about somebody's smile as opposed to the issues that matter?
There's no question in my mind that the quality of the campaign was far superior to that of the United States. That isn't the parallel. And I think we did face the issue head on, and I think it's right that free trade was decided in the campaign. But the chips were often soiled, fall as they may, and unnecessarily so. I think that it was far too acrimonious and personal a campaign than needed to be. And I feel a little sad about that. Well, I feel more than a little sad. I was offended, as many Canadians were, by the reprehensible nature of some of it, but the issue was joined. I agree with you.
Did that change it, though? Did the dirty ads and so on change the result? Are you saying we could have had the same debate without the same kind of low blows?
Well, I'll tell you what I think changed the result. This opens a question that you'll want to pursue with others. I think this was an astonishing intervention of the corporate world, that it was a victory for capitalism in that sense, and not a healthy phenomenon in Canada.
Thank you. I'm sorry, yes, Iona, just to
I was
comment
just going to
briefly?
say there's a profound divergence now between the business community and the rest of the country, and I think that's a polarity that's going to be very dangerous, and it reflects the polarity in the new right thinking itself, where they have an idea that business can be totally unrestricted without any kind of concern, and on the other hand, they want renewed restrictions and Neanderthal ways of looking at women and children and all the rights of social. That dichotomy is going to be dangerous for the future.
I just want to give you some good news. A Liberal has been elected in Sudbury, Diane Marlowe. Has been elected up there, yes, that's right. And an NDPer in Timmins, Chapleau. The NDP winning there, so some good news for you folks.
Irresistible. The sweep flows on.
And some more good news for Iona. Nothing final yet, but Duhamel is leading in St. Boniface. In Regina, Moscana, there's Ralph Goodale. Some more good news leading in Regina, Moscana.
Howard Pauley now in Selkirk, going in second place there.
Well, that people have been forecasting over the last couple of days that might be a very close fight for Howard Pauley in Selkirk, and it's turning out to be that.
The Prime Minister went in there in a direct effort to attack Howard Pauley.
Decision 88 will continue right after this. In Saskatchewan, PCs leading and elected in 126, Liberals in 79, NDP in 25. And we declared elected about 50 minutes ago a Conservative majority government. It seems that they will have no difficulty at all getting to the 148 required for majority in the 295-seat House that becomes Canada's 34th Parliament. And that's how it stands at this time as this historic night moves across the country here on CTV.
CTV news coverage of the 34th general election continues. Decision 88. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Well, a lot of material coming into us now, a blizzard, in fact, because we have we're mapping up part of Quebec, part of Ontario. We have new returns coming in from Manitoba. And at this stage, a note from Sudbury, as a matter of fact, that Diane Marlowe, chartered accountant, takes over from Doug Frith up there and will retain the seat for the Liberals in Sudbury. Barbara McDougall is speaking down at her headquarters of St. Paul's in Toronto. We declared her elected about 15 minutes ago, and she is speaking now to her party workers. Let's listen in.
The future of Canada is now going to be the most exciting and vital that we can make it. Thank you very much.
Well, we got into the conclusion of that statement. Barbara McDougall talking about the future of Canada, the Conservative Minister of Immigration, and she was in a tough fight there, but she pulled it off over A.D. Nicholson. And Peter Murphy is there. Peter, I don't know if you can get a microphone close to Barbara to see what she's saying. Do you want to give it a try?
Barbara, congratulations. What does this mean? It's a personal victory for you, and how do you feel about it and the nation?
Well, I feel very good about it. I love this riding, and I've worked very hard with the people of St. Paul's over the last 4 years. And I really appreciate their loyalty and support in this very important election, because I think it's going to be good for Canada, and the people of St. Paul's have clearly chosen that.
And really, this is also a choice of Canadians. What do you say about free trade and what's going to happen?
Well, I think that Canadians have chosen free trade. They've chosen to look outward rather than inward, and that it's going to mean a better future for all of us.
And how do you see the nation going in terms of moving along? Right away with free trade, passing it?
Well, I think that I'll wait until I hear from the Prime Minister and until he determines what the next steps are. But I think that the vote of confidence in him and in our party and in our cabinet and in our members tonight means that we're going to have a good future.
We are moving over now to the headquarters of Paul Martin Jr., La Salle Amar in Montreal, son of longtime Liberal politician. And Paul Martin Jr. is considered to be one of the potential candidates for the leadership of the Liberal Party, should John Turner step down in the near future.
Convention planned for February to deal with that question.
C'est un peu trop tôt pour le savoir, mais une chose est claire.
Ken Ernhofer is there. We're getting a look at this man who has for so many weeks been campaigning in this working class neighborhood in La Salle Amar, and has done very well against a candidate who was very, very popular, a man by the name of Claude Lantier. They called him Kid Kodak, as a matter of fact, because he got around to so many weddings and receptions and got his picture taken.
He always accused Paul Martin of flying into the riding while he drove into the riding.
Je voudrais féliciter aussi.
Paul Martin Jr., we will be back there very shortly, I'm told. Ken Ernhofer is there in Paul Martin's headquarters. So Paul Martin Jr. Will become a member of the 34th Parliament. We are declaring elected Lauren Nystrom of the NDP in Yorkton Melville, and in Lisgar Marquette, Charlie Mayer, the Minister of Grains and Oilseeds.
Very important in the West, a very important
Lisgar Marquette. And we are also showing at this point Lloyd Axworthy elected in Winnipeg South Centre. Not much of a surprise there. We'll probably see his picture
although he was
pop
in a
up
new
on
riding.
the screen a little later. There is another Axworthy, by the way, who at this moment is, there's Lloyd Axworthy, right? Re-elected in Winnipeg South Centre, and there is another Axworthy who at this moment in the riding of Saskatoon Clark's Crossing is leading Ray Natition.
And then Ray's a very popular minister locally. He's always had huge pluralities in
Here's
that.
Les Benjamin, another longtime NDP member.
Les Benjamin, Regina Lumsden, re-elected for the NDP. All right. Are we moving along? Yes. Now we're flashing back to Toronto, where in Broadview Greenwood, Dennis Mills still leading Lynn McDonald of the NDP. It looks like that's going to be a long night there.
700 votes has hung in throughout the evening. It's always been about that margin since the beginning.
Parkdale High Park has Jesse Fliss leading Andrew Witter in a two-way fight that has continued through several elections. Who knows? Will Jesse Fliss take it back this time? Scarborough Centre shows Pauline Browse trailing at this moment, but that too, as you say, is very tight. Scarborough is the traditional bellwether area. In Quebec, Rossi, the Liberal, trailing Gibault of the PCs, 404 lead there. And we're now going through some of these Quebec ridings in Montreal.
Lucy Pepin running second in the riding of Outremont. She was a very outspoken member of Parliament.
Hard to explain, given the fact that the Liberals are doing well elsewhere in Montreal. Howard Pauley now in the lead in Selkirk, 14 votes, 5 polls out of 193 heard from. And we are, we're declaring defeated. Saskatoon Clark's Crossing, Ray Natition defeated by a man by the name of Axworthy, and fortunately we have here sitting just to the right of me, Stephen Lewis.
Very good information on
New Democrat. Information about this particular Axworthy.
By God, somebody better check this out, but I believe that young Axworthy is the son-in-law of Roy McMurtry. And that Axworthy is a remarkably able fellow. There was much discussion. I can remember being in Regina just a couple of weeks ago, and there was a feeling that he might well take Natition in that riding, and clearly he took it overwhelmingly.
Quite decisively. There's the latest figures we have up there, 1,915 votes. That's very interesting in that riding where Ray Natition's been very popular. He was the one that recruited Emmett Hall to come out and speak on behalf of Medicare in the free trade debate.
I think he had the best quotation on free trade. Attributed to him in Columbo's Canadian quotations is, free trade with the Americans is like wife swapping with a bachelor.
Well, maybe he can write quotations for a little while, because it looks as though he's going to be out of the House of Commons. That does come, nevertheless, as a shock to many people. Ray Natition, the Attorney General, the Minister of Justice.
The list of cabinet ministers is growing quite long of defeats. Flora McDonald's, another surprise tonight.
Tom McMillan.
Tom McMillan, that's right, in Hillsborough and Prince Edward Island. One of these times, over the next little while, we're going to put a chart up, and we'll show you all that so that we can put the whole thing in perspective. But we are counting up to about, what, 4 now, cabinet ministers defeated?
4 or 5. Jim Kelleher for 5, I think.
Kelleher, Flora McDonald, Tom McMillan, Stu McGuinness, and now Ray Natition.
That's 5.
That's 5.
I've just looked at the stats in that riding, and based on the last election, the NDP had 34% of the vote, Ray Natition 51. So the turnaround there is quite dramatic. And Doug Richardson, who's in our green room as part of our guest panel, may be able to shed some light. He's from Saskatoon and has studied that area very carefully.
Good point, good point. We'll try to get to him later, Mike. Right now, I have this to say. CTV News coverage of the 34th general election continues in a moment. The national party standings at the bottom of your screen. PCs elected and leading in 129, Liberals 81, NDP 24. If you're tuning in late, about an hour ago, CTV News projected the election of a Conservative majority government. They should have no trouble gaining the 148 seats required for a majority in this 295-seat parliament. 295 up from 282 last time. We're going to run through some Ontario constituencies for you now. Here's Haldimand, Norfolk. Bud Bradley, PC, trailing Bob Speller, Liberal, 139 votes there. And David Peterson was out campaigning for Bob Speller. In Lincoln, John Munro is leading, but not by much at this stage, 385 votes over Shirley Martin. In York North, O'Brien, the Conservative incumbent, is trailing the Liberal. That's a new riding, by the way. Scarborough Centre, we had a look at this before. Here we go again. Pauline Brose is trailing there by 36 votes. That one looks as though it could go on for a while.
Very close.
And we're also going to take a look, I understand, very shortly at some of the ridings around Montreal to give you a review of just what's happening there. The last time we looked, we saw that Lucy Pépin was trailing in Outremont, which would be a big surprise if she were in trouble, because Outremont has been a Liberal stronghold for
That's where the Liberals were.
Marc Lalonde's old seat.
The Liberals were hoping to make so many gains on the island, even though they felt that rural Quebec would probably go Conservative. So it's going to be interesting to see how.
There it is, in fact. There it is, in fact. And I think we can give you a few more seats from Montreal. There's Bourassa.
Carlo Rossi is a strong constituency man, quite surprising. Still 80, only half the polls, really less than half heard from.
Lachine, Lac Saint Louis, Robert Layton is back in the House. And Drury, the son of Bud Drury, a longtime Liberal cabinet minister, seems to be going down to defeat. Jerry Wiener, re-elected in Pierrefonds Dellard, the Minister of Multiculturalism. Well, we're not calling him re-elected actually just yet, but he has a lead of 405 votes.
Those are all ridings where the Liberals had hoped to win.
Right.
Vic Drury and, as I say, right across there where they, Liberals had hoped to make breakthroughs. We haven't seen it there tonight. It's really quite remarkable, but it's been so up and down right across the country. I mean, when we began this broadcast tonight, back home in Atlantic Canada, we saw this Liberal tide. It suddenly hits Quebec, and bang, it's like a solid wall. And here we're seeing seats that are on the west end of the island of Montreal, largely English-speaking, tend to be traditionally supportive of the Liberals. The Maritimers went back to the Liberals tonight, but those in the west end of the island of Montreal haven't done so.
It would seem like the Tories really poured on the coal there in the last couple of days, spent a lot of time campaigning in Montreal, and obviously it worked. We have some prairie
The only turnover was Paul Martin Jr., where the Liberals had hoped to break through.
That's right. Here's a prairie popular vote chart that's rather interesting.
The Conservatives in the prairies down 20 points The NDP up 11, but if you look at how tight the overall figures are, they're 35, 34. Even the Liberals, with a very strong showing on the prairies now, up 10 points over 1984. So that should give them some help.
Oh boy!
There's the Moose Jaw race right there.
That's right. With as you see, Gottslig PC down to
the
defeat.
NDP have taken that tonight.
I think Ed Broadbent's point about taking a majority out of Saskatchewan is probably right.
Ray Funk, Prince Albert, Churchill River, that huge riding up across the top of Saskatchewan, going to the NDP. And here's Souris Moose Mountain, Len Gustafson is hanging on to that one for the Tories. We're declaring him re-elected. Now, I understand that Roy Romano, leader of the NDP in Saskatchewan, is available to talk to us at this moment from Saskatchewan. Good evening, Roy.
Good evening, Lloyd. Nice to talk to you.
Looks like a bit of a surge for the NDP on the prairies.
Well, certainly it's looking very good in Saskatchewan so far, rather early, of course. The polls have only been shut for about 3/4 of an hour, but I'm optimistic thus far, yes.
We have to ask you about Ray Natition. Are you as surprised as we all are sitting here?
Well, I am surprised because Ray has a very large personal following. He's a well-known person in Saskatoon and in Saskatchewan, but having said that, the NDP was very confident right from the very beginning. Chris Axworthy is a law professor at the University of Saskatchewan and a very intelligent, dynamic young person who had just a terrific machine going for him. And right early in the campaign, a lot of anxiety about the free trade debate arose on the doorsteps. One of my MLAs canvassing in that area said, we struck gold on the free trade, and I kept on thinking that it wouldn't work, that Ray's popularity would carry the day. It still might. But I'm a little bit surprised, notwithstanding the fact that the signs were there.
The free trade issue has been very curious there. Despite Grant Devine, the Premier's strong support for it, the public didn't go for it.
No, in fact, I think Saskatchewan turned around very early in 1988 to the point now where, if I'm not incorrect, the level of opposition to free trade here, Pamela, is highest of any province. At least it's near the very top, about 2 to 1. I think that basically stems from a number of things: worry about the Canadian Wheat Board, worry about social programs, and I think, frankly, worried about any slick-talking Montreal politician trying to sell them the Brooklyn Bridge. People out here are pretty down-to-earth and are going to look very, very carefully at something like this, which has a fundamental impact on the future of Canada and this part of the region.
Well, I couldn't agree more that good Saskatchewanians are down to earth, being one myself.
I thought it might appeal to you that way.
We have the word here that Bill McKnight, the Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development in the province of Saskatchewan, is leading in his riding at this moment.
Yes.
So he seems to be doing all right. And we also noted, running across the screen there, just to pick up on something else, that in Ottawa, Marlene Catterell, a popular local politician, has won that riding over David Dobney in Ottawa West.
That's another ping-pong seat that goes back and forth in every election. When the public servants in Ottawa West get angry, they throw out the incumbent, and we've been seeing it happen there for 20 or 30 years.
Roy Romano, please stand by because we may be getting back to you as the night progresses out there. Thank you very much for being with us at this time.
My pleasure.
You note that on the bottom of your screen, flashing along now, names of elected members coming in from Ontario, Quebec, some clear... there's... we saw Rosemont flash in there,
Yes.
didn't we? The smallest... Benoit Tremblay won it.
Yes, indeed, of course. Suzanne Blais-Grenier, trailing badly. She broke with her party, ran as an independent, hoping to overcome what she thought was antipathy to the Tories, and of course it didn't work.
But what it means is that Jacques Guilbeault, who moved over from another riding to run there for the Liberals, didn't make it. Here's a Huntsik, Raymond Garneau, we are declaring elected for the Liberals. Quite easily there with one poll reporting in. And there's the riding of Bourassa again.
Still going back and forth. We
Right.
don't have any clear result there yet. Some very tight races. Outremont, Lucy Pepin still running in second place.
Doug Richardson, former aide to John Turner, is here with us, and we're going to get to Doug in just a moment. Perhaps we'll take just this one look at this riding of Richmond Wolfe. There you see it with Tardif in the lead. Doug, you're, of course, out in the West these days, stationed in Saskatoon. How do you feel about what's happened to the Liberals tonight and John Turner's party?
Well, obviously, I'm a little encouraged by some of the results, particularly the Atlantic. It's tough to see where the breaks went in Quebec, Lloyd, but we're still hopeful. Manitoba still, I think, provides some hope for us. The one riding that you have shown Ralph Goodale leading, and I think provides also some good hope for us.
The kind of picture we're getting from Quebec is that rural Quebec was simply solid conservative, and there were some breakthroughs in Montreal, which really means that when all the tallies are in, they're going to have perhaps over 60 of those 75 seats in the province of Quebec going Tory.
Well, some of the appeals that we've got to remember made to Quebecers in the last few weeks have been really quite bizarre. The suggestion that it's all right to vote for the Irish because they're not really English. As an Irish person of Irish extraction, I find that offensive.
All right, here we are. The PC's 129, the Liberals 81, the NDP 25. As we come to the end of another segment of our CTV election night broadcast, we will be back. We now have 235 out of a total of 295 ridings heard from across the country. Alberta and British Columbia still to come. This is Decision 88 on CTV.
Welcome back to CFTO's election coverage. If you look at the bottom of the screen, we can see the national board with the Conservatives leading or elected 128 ridings, the Liberals 82, the NDP 25, and that's for a total of 235 out of 295 ridings.
And as we take a look at some of the notables, Michael Cassidy in Ottawa Centre, who you of course recall used to be the Ontario NDP leader, has been defeated. Jennifer Cossett, Tom Cossett's widow, has been defeated in Leeds Grenville. We have 5 Tories possibly losing their seats in Metro Toronto, all in the East End, and Paul Rogers has that story.
And those swing ridings in Scarborough are causing some tremendous races. Look at your board. Neil Young, now we can tell you he has been re-elected in Beaches Woodbine for the New Democrats. In Broadview Greenwood, Dennis Mills, who's been campaigning there for about 6 months, has unseated Lynn MacDonald, the NDP's environment critic. David MacDonald, parachuted in after David Crombie left Rosedale, has taken it for the Progressive Conservatives. The check mark on your screen indicates a win. Jim Karagiannis over Paul McCrossan, another unseated Tory, this time in Scarborough Agincourt, a swing riding. To another swing riding where Pauline Browse is getting the race of her life tonight from Jim Katsitis. Odysseus Katsitis, I should say, of the Liberals. Look at that, only a 205-vote lead there. To Scarborough Rouge River, Derek Lee, now elected over Doug Boswell, the Progressive Conservative incumbent. Tom Wapple, the Liberal candidate, has unseated Reg Stackhouse, the incumbent Tory in Scarborough West, another swing riding. And in Willowdale, we can now tell you that the Premier's brother, Jim Peterson, has defeated incumbent John Oostrom of the Progressive Conservatives. The Conservatives tonight having a terrible time of it in Metro East. Watching Metro East, I'm Paul Rogers.
Thanks, Paul. In Metro West, Lynn Ilioff says so far just one upset.
Thanks, Chris. We have elected 3 more candidates in Metro West since we last saw you. In Eglinton Lawrence, there was no incumbent in this riding. Joe Volpe for the Liberals has been elected. In Etobicoke Lakeshore, a real battle going on here between Patrick Boyer and Judy Brandow. At the moment, the incumbent is in the lead. In Etobicoke North, we have an upset. Roy McLaren has won his seat back from Bob Pennick. He lost it in '84. Parkdale High Park, we have another upset here. Jesse Fliss, same thing happened to him in '84. He lost out to Andrew Witter. He has won that seat back. In St. Paul's, Barbara McDougall had quite a fight earlier tonight, but she has managed to hang on to her seat in St. Paul's. And in Trinity Spadina, this riding has been going back and forth all night between the incumbent Dan Heap and Tony Ayano, a political newcomer for the Liberals. We'll be watching that one to see what happens. Watching Metro West, I'm Lynn Ilioff.
And Bill Hutchison brings us up to date now on the ridings just outside Metro.
Thank you, Ken. Almost all the races have been decided outside of Metro. Brampton-Malton, Harry Chadwick has now won that riding, defeating Gurjeet Grewal. In Mississauga East, Albina Garnieri has taken that riding away from Laurie Pallett for the PCs. The PCs had held that riding up until this election. Bob Horner in Mississauga West has been returned. And over in Northumberland, we have a battle going on here, only 82 votes separating Reg Jewell and Christine Stewart. This one may go right down to the wire. In York North, Maurizio Bevilacqua with the lead over Mike O'Brien. The PCs held this riding, and it's still up for grabs. In York Simcoe, John Cole has defeated Frank Stronach, the chairman of Magna Corporation. John Cole, of course, taking over for the PCs as a candidate there after Sinclair Stevens did not have his nomination papers signed by the Prime Minister. Keeping an eye on the ridings just outside of Metro Toronto, I'm Bill Hutchison.
Thanks, Bill. And there's some interesting races in Hamilton, Niagara. Here's Julie Roper.
Thank you, Chris. Interesting as well, especially with free trade being the dominant issue. Taking a look at our slates, in Gerv Fretz has been elected. That's in Erie, and there must have been some nervous folks around there tonight because Allard Coline, who was the mayor of West Lincoln Township, was really climbing up on him. And in Hamilton East, Sheila Copps will be back in office, very outspoken critic against free trade, but she was back in definitely. In Lincoln, we have Shirley Martin coming back to Ottawa. She was appointed to cabinet before the House was dissolved, and she beat John Monroe, which was a tough battle there as well. Moving on to Welland, St. Catharines Thorold, where another upset, Gib Perron has beat Alan Pitts, who was the former mayor of Welland. That's what's happening around Hamilton, Niagara at this time. I'm Julie Roper.
National Editor Tom Clark. Julie Roper mentioned free trade and its effect out there. What about the effect in Metro Toronto, where it was obviously unpopular, according to Gallup polls at least?
Well, Ken, there's no question that free trade was still the dominant issue in Metro Toronto. I'm buried here in paper the results of a truly computerized election. But what's interesting is that, let's take a look at Metro Toronto. 43% of the popular vote for the Liberals, 37.2% for the PCs, 17.8% for the NDP. This is a gain of 8 for the, there we can see it here. Well, the numbers are slightly different, but the Liberals are up by 7, the Tories down by 5, the NDP down by 2. But add up the Liberal and NDP vote, and that you can assume is the anti-free trade vote in Metro. The same situation in Ontario if you take a look at the popular vote there. So in a sense, there is a moral victory for the anti-free trade forces tonight, however, not a political victory. And the next question is the leadership of those two opposition parties very much in question tonight.
Tom, when you saw the NDP vote was down, is that because people wanted to go to the Liberals as the party to fight free trade?
Yeah, Ken, I don't think there's any question about that, and I think that this whole campaign, in a sense, was a fight between the Liberals and the NDP as to who could capture that anti-free trade vote. This was also the strongest card that the Tories had to play during the election because they could split that opposition vote. The Liberals won that very handsomely and have walked away with that prize tonight.
Thanks, Tom. And now let's move to Eastern Ontario, where Mike Catrice has some results.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. Indeed, Eastern Ontario has really been just a story of upsets tonight. There have been 10 out of 14 seats upset there. As you can see in Leeds Grenville, Jim Jordan has upset Jennifer Cossett. Jennifer held on to that seat since 1982 when she won it in a by-election after her husband Tom had died. We can take a look at Ottawa Centre. Here's another big upset. Mike Cassidy, former Ontario NDP leader, has lost. He won that seat in 1984, and that's first-time runner Mac Harb who's defeated him there. That's the situation right now in Eastern Ontario. I'm Mike Catrice.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike Ongarato is taking a look at what's happening in Western Ontario.
And there could be a split between the Tories and the PC in Western Ontario. In Essex Kent, Jerry Picard, the Liberal candidate, defeating Jim Caldwell, the incumbent PC there. Moving over to Kent now, Rex Crawford defeating Elliot Hardy in that particular riding. Once again, the Liberals gaining a seat there. And the last one, Lambton Middlesex, it looks like Sid Ferguson defeated Frawley there, the PC incumbent, by a substantial margin. Now back to the desk with Ken and Chris.
Thank you, Mike. And Lynn Eliov tells me that in Trinity Spadina, Dan Heap has now been elected over Tony Ayano. That was a close fight all night long. Once again, the bottom of your screen, you see the national tote board with the PCs leading with 132 and the Liberals 80, the NDP 23. We'll return with decision 88 in just a moment.
This hour, CTV News is projecting a Conservative majority government. At this time, the PCs elected and leading in 132, the Liberals in 80, the NDP in 23. The Liberals made some early gains tonight in Atlantic Canada, only to be shut down when they got to Quebec. Rural Quebec went almost entirely Tory, and Tories made gains on the island of Montreal. In Manitoba and Saskatchewan, the NDP and the Liberals have picked up some seats, but there have also been many disappointments for the NDP. That's the situation at this time as our election night coverage of 1988 continues to roll across the land here on CTV.
From the CTV News Election Center in Toronto, Decision 88. Reported by Pamela Wallen. Mike Duffy, Nancy Wilson, and Lloyd Robertson.
And we welcome those viewers across the province of Alberta who are just joining us now. Hello to all of you. You've seen the story here. PC is elected leading in 133, and this is the place, as Mike Duffy said a moment ago, where it will likely put the Conservatives over the top in terms of the numbers required for a majority, which is 148 seats. That's what we project. It looks as though all the projections are going to come true, that so far as Alberta is concerned, the Tories will have a majority. Now, there have been some casualties in the cabinet. We're going to run through the Conservative cabinet just to show you what's happened tonight. John Crosbie re-elected easily in Newfoundland. Elmer MacKay re-elected in Nova Scotia. Stuart McGuinness defeated in his riding of Halifax, the Minister of Public Works. Tom McMillan, the Minister of the Environment, defeated in Charlottetown. Bernard Valcourt re-elected, the Minister of Small Business in New Brunswick. Gerald Merrithew, Minister of Veterans Affairs, re-elected in New Brunswick. Pierre Blais, the Junior Minister of Agriculture, re-elected in Quebec. Robert de Cotteret, re-elected in Quebec. Monique Landry, re-elected, and the Prime Minister, of course, Brian Mulroney, re-elected in his riding up there in Charlevoix in Quebec. Marcel Masse, re-elected in Frontenac.
We have two Bouchards elected, both Lucien and Benoit. Monique Vezina, and the Youth Minister, Jean Charest, re-elected.
Yes, and we should point out to you that there have been quite a few casualties. Also, Communications Minister Flora MacDonald upset by Liberal Peter Milliken in Kingston in the Islands. Solicitor General James Kelleher ousted in Sault Ste. Marie by Steve Butland of the NDP. Justice Minister Ray Natishan defeated in his Saskatoon riding by the NDP candidate. We mentioned Public Works Minister Stuart McGuinness and Tom McMillan, and Joe Clark's wife, Maureen McTeer, defeated in the Ottawa area riding of Carleton Gloucester by Liberal Eugene Bellemare in her first try for the House. And here is Maureen McTeer.
It was not a lack of organization, and I want to thank you for both on my behalf. Je suis très contente de la victoire du parti à l'échelle nationale. Le Premier ministre Mulroney est le premier Mulroney is the first Prime Minister for a long time to have won twice with a majority consecutively. Maintenant le mandat de continuer à bâtir notre avenir et je sais que je parle pour tous ceux et celles de vous building our future, and I know that I express our feelings to all of us. We are along with him in this fight, for this great fight for Canada. I'm proud about this fight that we have won, and I'm full of confidence in our future. Unfortunately, there was a Liberal tide in this part of Ontario, in Quebec, and we were caught in it. I hope you take pride, as I do, that we fought hard for what we believe in, that we made the democratic process work because we cared. That's what elections are all about. That is why I was here, and I know that's why you are here.
Maureen McTeer speaking from her riding of Carleton Gloucester near Ottawa. And Pamela, the story there may have been that the Christian Heritage candidate pulled enough votes away from Maureen McTeer on the abortion issue.
A very strong woman candidate running and tackled Maureen McTeer on some very tricky issues like the abortion question, drew away a lot of right-wing support, and a lot of Conservatives insiders are also saying that Maureen McTeer decided not to mention Brian Mulroney very much in her campaign, and perhaps in retrospect, given his support and his showing tonight, maybe she should have run a little bit stronger on that side.
Allowing a popular local candidate to run right up the middle and take it, Eugene Bellemare. Mike Duffy, we haven't introduced you to the folks in Alberta yet. Mike, give us a
stranger.
Mike,
I'm a stranger in Alberta.
Mike Duffy's here. You all know him, of course, and we are delighted to have him with us on our CTV broadcast tonight. And you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say, one of the interesting and remarkable things we've seen in this campaign, and particularly in Maureen McTeer's riding, was that she brought together a coalition of young people, of people who weren't involved in politics before, but who believed in her and she got them involved. And when you visited her headquarters, it was a real example to the rest of the country, and I'm sure it's happened many other places, but it was quite remarkable to see how her personality drew in young people who weren't involved, who were sort of turned off politics. Tonight, she took it gracefully, her defeat, and is encouraging these young people to stay involved.
We have a microphone in front of Lloyd Axworthy, who has been re-elected in his riding in Winnipeg, and he's speaking now. Let's see if we can listen in here.
Okay, what your general feelings on the national picture, Mr. Axworthy?
Well, to be honest, I haven't had fully time to look at it. I've been interested more in the results of my own riding and results coming in through the province of Manitoba, and I'm obviously overwhelmed by the kind of support I've got in my own riding. I guess it's close to 60% support the last count, and which is very encouraging and reassuring for me. And obviously very, very pleased with what's happened in Manitoba. This is something we've worked on. We've had an incredible number of people working on this for the last couple of years to build this up, and with the help of Mrs. Carstairs and her group, and federal chairman David Unruh, and a lot of workers and exceptionally good candidates.
All right, Lloyd Axworthy in Winnipeg speaking there, and we are going now over to Kingston in the Islands, where Flora MacDonald is speaking to her party workers and is in front of some microphones there. Let's listen in and see if we can hear what she has to say. She was defeated tonight.
We're still going on to that party. Excuse me. TV. Friends, comrades, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say to you a great big thank you for all that you've done for me. Not just tonight. But over the 16 years, I want to first of all congratulate Peter Milliken for the job he has done and to wish him well in the work that he has before him in Parliament. I trust he will have a very good stay while he's there. And secondly, most of all, I want to thank you. You really have been a terrific team, and it's just been wonderful to work with you. The excitement, the exhilaration, all of those things that go with elections and indeed go between elections. You've been marvelous, and I've been particularly pleased, if I may say, at the support that I've had throughout this campaign from the young people. Because I think... Young people have understood the future of this nation, and they know where it was we have to go. And you know, that's reflected tonight in the majority government, which Prime Minister Mulroney is winning right across the country.
Flora MacDonald, gracious in defeat as she has always been in public life, the many, many years she has been on the political scene in this country, having worked for John Diefenbaker when he was Prime Minister, then deciding to run on her own and winning in Kingston in the Islands for all those years, and tonight going down to defeat. Flora MacDonald. Now, we just want to make one more note here of, we were talking earlier, to those of you just joining us, you might be interested in this. David Orlico, it would seem, has been upset in his riding in Winnipeg, and the last word we had was that Cyril Keeper, who also was in Winnipeg North Centre candidate, has been defeated. There he is. There's a picture of him on the screen now. The riding that was held for years and years by Stanley Knowles, and this marks quite a turnover for the NDP. Hard to believe, in fact, for many people.
As a matter of fact, the Liberals established their beachhead in the West at our expense rather than at the Tories' expense, which had not been anticipated.
But people were hoping with Sharon Carstairs, a very popular provincial leader elected there, that it would start to spill over into the federal scene, and there seems to have been some movement that way.
We have been told that Sharon Carstairs is speaking right now, and we may be able to pick up and hear what she has to say, because she is the reason for some of this tide. Sharon Carstairs, good evening.
Good evening.
Do we say congratulations to you for this Liberal surge in Winnipeg, or who are you giving the credit to tonight?
Oh, I'm giving the credit to all those very hard-working Liberals, particularly in Winnipeg, who managed to bring out the vote like they brought it out for me in April. And it's always to the workers go the victory, not to the individuals.
I guess why it's confusing to people from the outside, Sharon Carstairs, is that you disagree with John Turner on some of the issues, and we wonder just who this Liberal support is for.
Well, I have disagreed, obviously, with all the federal leaders on the Meech Lake Accord, and that, of course, will be decided here in the province of Manitoba and in the province of New Brunswick. And we think that Canada can afford a better accord, and we intend to get a better accord.
Sharon Carstairs, it's Mike Duffy. You and Jean Chrétien are very close. He's campaigned for you provincially, as well as for Liberal candidates in the Winnipeg area of Manitoba federally. How much of this would you say is the result of Jean Chrétien's personal popularity?
Oh, well, of course, Jean and I, as you said, are very close friends, and he came out at my request in order to give a boost to the workers. I think that boost is obviously very important, because the workers will work just that much harder when they have people like Chrétien and indeed Turner, who was here 4 times during the election, ending on Saturday night. And I think Mr. Turner gave them a very healthy dose of enthusiasm on Saturday night that sent them out to get out every single Liberal vote today in the city of Winnipeg.
This is sounding very unified. You're not usually a Turner fan, but you obviously are on the broadcast tonight.
I'm a Liberal. Always have been and always will be.
I got to tell people, Sharon Carstairs is originally a Maritimer too, so we know about Liberals in the Maritimes, don't we?
That's right, we certainly do. Born and bred in Halifax, and I learned my liberalism very early.
Good to talk to you tonight.
Mrs. Carstairs,
nice to talk to you.
Mrs. Carstairs, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
CTV News election night coverage continues right after this. Seats have been added, 4 in the province of Ontario, 5 in Alberta, 4 in British Columbia, and we are wondering tonight whether the Tories will sweep all of Alberta, or will there be some breakthroughs in places like Edmonton, Strathcona, where there's a very popular Reform candidate, and will the NDP make some headway? Well, we'll see very shortly. We're waiting for the computer to start spewing out some of those returns, but for those of you joining us in Alberta, we want to give you some reviews. For example, the national popular vote change, Pamela.
Taking a look, this is across the country, coming right up to the Alberta border. We see that the Liberals have made a gain. The Conservatives have dropped 6 points from their standing in 1984 when they swept the country, of course, with 211 seats. But when you look at the actual numbers, 42% for the Conservatives' popular vote. You can't have anything but a majority government with that. The Liberals sitting there at 36%, healthy, strong, but not good enough.
Let's just do a little review now, Pamela, of how it went across the country. In the Atlantic, the Liberals did very well there, going back to some traditional territory in Cape Breton, in the Acadian area of New Brunswick, for a total of 20. The PCs picked up only 12 of the 32 seats in the Maritimes. But when you got into Quebec, the picture changed drastically. There it is. Now, of the 75 seats in Quebec, the Tories won 58 last time. This time it's up to 62, and the Liberals have captured 13. So that's where the story is told tonight.
Absolutely. You can see there, you can see it on the popular vote, that the Conservatives, they were up, in fact, about 5% before, now up about 3%. But that just accounts for those.
But they were so high in 84, and now they're still
Who ever thought it possible to increase?
Yes, indeed.
Here are a few ridings still to be decided in the province of Quebec. There's Richmond Wolfe, for example, where the PC, Côté, has a 191, is that vote lead over the Tory Tardif. And in Outremont, we are declaring that Lucy Pépin has been defeated. Another very prominent woman candidate defeated, woman member of Parliament. Here are the Ontario Party standings. Well, this is a little different story again. You see the PC's 47 to 41, and that has not been totally decided yet either, because we have them leading in 3 in both cases, Liberals and PCs there. And here's the Ontario popular vote change.
You can see the numbers there. The Liberals coming up 8 points. The Conservatives dropping 9 points over 1984, but they are neck and neck, 38.9, 38.1, so there's still some tight races there. The NDP quite strong at 20%, but about what they usually have.
The Conservatives were saying all along, Pamela, that if they managed to clear up 30 to 35 seats in the province of Ontario, given their Quebec strength, they knew they could walk home with this quite easily. And at the moment, it's 134 PCs, 81 Liberals, but the seats from Alberta are now beginning to come on stream, all 26 of them. And let's just take a look at how it's been on the prairies through Manitoba and Saskatchewan up to now.
This is really where you're starting to see some interesting changes, and it reflects what we saw in Manitoba. The Conservatives down 19 points, the NDP and Liberals both up.
A tie, 13-13 for the NDP and the Liberals 5, but the Liberals
Whoever thought you'd see the number 5 on the prairies for the Liberal Party in the last 15
Isn't that
years?
startling? I wonder if John Turner will take some credit for that. I'm sure he will.
I think he's probably enjoying watching this, wishing he was there with Jack Webster watching these results come in. So.
Here are the first results now from the province of Alberta. Medicine Hat, Porter, the PC, in the lead with just one poll reporting at this stage. So these, of course, are very early and scattered returns. CHP means Christian Heritage Party.
There are trouble for Tories generally.
Right. There are 15 other parties running in this election, and we may be seeing the Reform candidates in some of these slates as well. Beaver River, there's a PC running third, Dahmer. Now, do I understand that Doug Richardson, our friend over here to my right, former aide to John Turner, has something to say about this one? Do you know this story, Doug?
Beaver River is the new riding, no incumbent, and it was expected that Ernie Sen, the Liberal, would do well. The NDP were also expected, Stephen, to do very well, and this is what's transpired. Also, I think at some point we'll want to watch the Reform vote here, as well as Wild Rose and McLeod.
Certainly in ridings
like
like Joe Clark, where he is up against Preston Manning.
So that.
Well, we'll look forward. You mentioned Preston Manning, of course. That's where he's running up against Joe Clark in Yellowhead. We haven't heard from there yet, but we'll be getting results from there very shortly. These are just the very early returns from the province of Alberta, as we stand with 239 out of 295 ridings reported so far. And this is Decision 88 on CTV.
And welcome back to CFTO's election coverage. Taking a look at the standings at the bottom of your screen, we have the Conservatives leading or elected in 134 ridings, the Liberals in 83, the NDP in 24, and that's with results in 241 out of 295 ridings. Taking a look at what's happening in Metro West, here's Lynn Elioff.
Well, we finally have candidates elected in all 11 ridings. The last to come in, Etobicoke Lakeshore, the Tory incumbent Patrick Boyer has been re-elected. This is the only riding without a Liberal candidate, and as you can see, the Libertarians got just over 1,000 votes, perhaps a protest vote by Liberals. In Etobicoke Centre, Michael Wilson has been re-elected, and no surprise there. In St. Paul's, Barbara McDougall had quite a fight on her hands tonight. She came back on top. In St. Paul's. In Etobicoke North, Roy McLaren has upset the Tory incumbent Bob Pennock. Roy McLaren for the Liberals. He lost in 84 to Pennock. In Parkdale High Park, another upset. Jesse Fliss, who lost in 84 to Andrew Witter, has beat out Witter. Jesse Fliss back in Parkdale High Park. And just to recap, in Davenport, Charles Catcher for the Liberals is back in Eglinton Lawrence, Joe Volpe for the Liberals, a political newcomer. Trinity Spadina, the NDP incumbent Dan Heap is back in York Centre. The Liberal incumbent Bob Kaplan is in York Southwest, and John Nunziata, member of the Rat Pack, he is back in for the Liberals. In York West, Sergio Markey, the Liberal incumbent, has been re-elected, and that's what's happened in Metro West. I'm Lynn Elioff.
And still some tight races going on in Metro East. Here's Paul Rogers.
And if you could be invited to one victory party tonight, it might be Scarborough Centre. Look at that. Pauline Brose has now been elected by our CTV computer. That's what the check mark means. It's a 357 vote lead with 160 polls in. That has been an incredibly tight one all night long. Checking the screen in Rosedale, David McDonald parachuted in. He's Canada's ambassador to Ethiopia. He's won that riding. Also a winner, Jim Peterson, the Premier's brother. What a battle in Willowdale. He went against John Oostrom, and upset him. Dennis Mills upset Lynn McDonald as well in Broadview Greenwood. That was a tight one, and he has come out on top. Other winners to tell you about in Don Valley East, Alan Redway, the former mayor of East York, a winner tonight. Barbara Green, a winner in Don Valley North. John Bosley, no surprise, in Don Valley West, former Speaker of the House. Paul McCrossan, the Tory, upset by Jim Karagianis, the Liberal, in Scarborough Agincourt. Bob Hicks won his seat back for the Tories in Scarborough East. Finally, Reg Stackhouse, the Tory, has been upset by Liberal Tom Wapple in Scarborough West. Watching Metro East, I'm Paul Rogers.
Thanks, Paul. And taking a look at the ridings neighboring Metro, here's Bill Hutchison.
Thank you, Christine. Only a couple of ridings still to be decided just outside of Metro. Northumberland is still up in the air. It has been Tory since Confederation, but Reg Jewell having a tough battle holding on to it with a challenge from Christine Stewart. In York North, Mike O'Brien has a lead, 246 votes at this point over Maurizia Bevilacqua, but that has gone back and forth throughout the night. A couple of other notables in Brampton. John McDermott, the Minister of State for Housing, has been re-elected, as has Otto Jelinek, the Supply and Services Minister in Oakville-Milton. Burlington, Bill Kempling has been re-elected. Don Blencarn holding on to Mississauga South. John Cole has defeated Frank Stronach in York Simcoe, Sinclair Stevens' old riding. And in Halton Peel, business columnist and Toronto Sun editor Garth Turner has been elected. Taking a look at the ridings around Metro Toronto, I'm Bill Hutchison.
And some interesting happenings tonight in Hamilton and Niagara. Here's Julie Roper.
Thank you, Ken. We've had an upset in Hamilton West, where Peter Peterson, a strong constituency man, has gone down to Stan Keys, a reporter with CHCH-TV for 15 years. That's quite an upset there. And recapping, Sheila Copps is back in, of course, and another veteran, Alan Pitts, the former mayor of Welland, has been defeated. That's what we have so far from Hamilton, Niagara. I'm Julie Roper.
Thanks, Julie. And now over to Tom Clark and our panel.
Thank you, Chris. Well, joining me now, some people, some faces you may recognize. Larry Grossman, the former leader of the Ontario PCs. My friend Herschel Ezrin worked the other side of the fence at Queen's Park. And John Godfrey, the editor of the Financial Post. Larry, let me start with you. You've been through the experience of not doing terribly well in an election.
That's an understatement.
Two leaders tonight, possibly in the same situation. Leadership changes out of this?
Well, I think Ed Broadbent did remarkably poorly, far worse than they should have in the circumstance. He failed to take the initiative. Clearly, his leadership will be under some pressure. John Turner, less so. And I guess if I were advising the Liberals, which Herschel does much better than I do, I guess I would say that John, for the sake of the party, regardless of how he feels, should, in this circumstance, hang on for a while to let an orderly transition.
Let's find out. Herschel, what are you going to say to John Turner tomorrow morning?
Well, I think he's probably going to talk to us tonight before I ever get a chance to speak to him.
Should he resign?
I think he's going to look at all of this. I think he's already made up his mind, according to some news that I watched on CTV a little while ago, and we're going to have to see how he exposes what he's going to be doing over the next little while. It's quite remarkable, the turnaround that's occurred since the beginning of the election for the Liberals, though. They obviously were not successful in stopping the Tory majority tide tonight. But I think Mr. Turner can be very proud of the performance of the Liberal Party.
John, from the business community's point of view, and I don't want to put you necessarily in that ghetto, but obviously there must be a lot of rejoicing. I mean, today the dollar up 1.50 cents, an incredible expression of confidence in what they thought was going to happen tonight.
Yes, I think that'll continue for a bit, and of course now it's up to the business community to prove that they're as good as they think they are, because they've given the government the backing on free trade. It's by no means going to be an easy road from here on in the United States, and it'll be now time to take the leap and see what we can make out of it.
But are you generally happy with the results tonight, John?
Oh, sure. The business community is delighted. They will now be able to say to foreign investors, come on in, we will be able to give you access to the markets which you've been asking for. And I think there'll be a little bit of a letdown, as these things always happen. I think you can see the markets will have already discounted the victory to a certain extent, so that things will be flat after, I think, about Wednesday.
Yeah, Herschel, there's no question that we've hit a watershed moment in our history, in our 120-year history. That was a history that John Turner was trying to tell all of us that we should not change, that we shouldn't take this veering off, either to the right or the left, depending on which way you want to look at it. Why did he fail in the last week? Because the polls, look, I mean, if you take a look at the final results now, they're not that far off from what the polls said it would be. Very quickly, what happened to John Turner in the last week?
I think several things happened, not the least of which was quite an effective negative advertising campaign by the Conservative Party against Mr. Turner. But I think what you saw was a strong, in this case, anti-free trade vote if you combine the Liberal and NDP, but obviously in a parliamentary system, the Conservatives appear well on the way to winning a majority, and that's what counts in terms of forming a government.
We'll come back to you in a second. We've got to take a break. Let's go back to Ken and Christine.
Thanks, Tom. And again, looking at the board right now, the way things stand with 254 ridings reporting, we seem to be one away from a majority for the Tories. We have 147 leading or elected, Liberals 84, and the NDP 23.
And a lot of the problems tonight for the Tories coming in Metro Toronto, where they have lost 7 seats now to the Liberals. We'll come back to take a look at Metro in just a little while, but right now we rejoin the network after this short break.
Election picture, and there it is, the majority for the PCs. Confirmed now. We projected it about, oh, it's the other side. There we are, sorry. There you are, in any event. The majority, predicted by CTV 1 hour and 50 minutes ago, and we have now reached it as the tide rolls through the province of Alberta's 26 seats. The PCs elected and leading in 150, Liberals in 84, NDP in 22, changing as we go. Starting off in the Atlantic region tonight, it was all Liberals for a while. Then when the returns started coming in from the province of Quebec, that's when the story changed, and now we're at a majority government for the Conservatives. That's how it stands at this stage as we move across the country on our election coverage here on CTV.
CTV news coverage of the 34th general election continues. Decision 88. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Here we are back at our election central. Craig Oliver is up in Baie-Comeau, where the party is going on right now because the Conservatives some time ago realized that they were going to romp ahead with a majority government, and now it is confirmed as we've moved in to the province of Alberta. Those big blue balloons bouncing up to the ceiling in Brian Mulroney's hometown.
That's going to be quite a party there tonight. They'll have 3,000 or 4,000 people.
The Prime Minister doesn't want to make his statement to the nation, his final statement, before the polls close in British Columbia.
I'm here.
So he'll wait, even though he knows, having seen it on CTV, that he has a majority government.
Hello, Craig.
Well, hello, Lloyd. The victory party has begun to roll here in the old hockey arena in Baie-Comeau.
Are they aware right now, Craig, that we have now reached the actual count of 150? That is, the majority is confirmed. We projected it 2 hours ago. Now it's there for sure.
I don't know whether they know it or not, Lloyd. I'm surrounded with people here, and I'll just, excuse me, how are you people feeling about all this?
Hello?
Hey, how you feeling?
I'm feeling fine.
Parlez anglais.
Yeah, I do.
How you feeling?
Pretty good, and you?
Fine. Everybody here happy about this?
Oh, yeah.
When did you learn he was going to win?
Since I came here.
Okay. Well, I mean, it wasn't a question of learning he was going to win. They thought for sure they were going to win. They were saying it all night. One of his oldest friends here tonight, somebody who served with him in government, said that really this is 2 victories tonight. The victory, obviously, of the Conservative Party, but also a personal victory for Brian Mulroney. As this man put it, Canadians have decided to give him a break. They've decided to forgive him for, as he put it, his excess verbiage and patronage and other problems he had, and say, give this guy a chance and see what he'll do. And I think that's very much a part of how Mulroney managed to swing the tide on free trade. It isn't that Canadians have decided 100% to buy free trade, but what they have decided to do is say, he's promised us he's going to protect Canadian sovereignty, and we'll give him the chance to see if he does.
Thank you very much, Craig. Okay. We will be back to you a little later as the party continues up there. Thanks a lot. Very good point Craig makes about the fact that Canadians really do not love free trade all that much, according to all the polls, but they have bought Brian Mulroney as the manager, which is what they were trying to do right from the outset.
And Craig has been saying for the last few days that this is really putting Brian Mulroney on notice.
Don Mazinkowski, the Minister of Everything, as they call him in Ottawa, re-elected in Vegreville. 5 portfolios, is it? That's right.
Harvey Andre also elected in Calgary Centre.
That's right, and we move on through Alberta with Conservatives being elected. We know for a fact that Blaine Thacker has been re-elected also. We don't have a picture of him at this particular moment, but he's been elected as well. And here are some ridings from the province of Alberta, which we can show you on our standings boards. Medicine Hat, Porter, PCs, re-elected. Calgary Centre, there's Harvey Andre's riding. You can take a look at We were able to call that one with just one poll coming in.
The Reform Party running second, though, in that one poll.
That's right.
Arnold Malone. Again, the Reform Party running strongly second there with 7 of the polls of 150 reporting. And again, we see Dave Nickerson from the Western Arctic, the Conservative who was convicted of battering his wife, running second there.
There's Blaine Thacker, re-elected there. Now there's the Reform Party candidate again. That's the RPC you see on the screen. Yellowhead. Here's the first return from Joe Clark's riding. Preston Manning in second place behind Joe Clark by 45 votes at this stage. Here's Regina Wascana again. Looks like we're going to be following this one for a while. Larry Schneider, 292 votes now ahead of Ralph Goodale, the Liberal, and that has been flashing back and forth. John Gormley, the Tory, trailing in Battleford's Meadow Lake, Taylor, the NDP, 385 votes.
That's been a long time NDP riding in the Battleford's area, and before that, as Doug will remember, it was Liberal.
Yes.
And we're seeing
interesting thing, and just before I go to that quickly, Lloyd, I guess as a Liberal I should say congratulations to the Tories. They worked hard. I'm not, Alan and I aren't overly happy about the result, but they have earned the victory.
Thank you, Doug. We're just going to take a look here at the Prairie's popular vote.
You can see the changes, even though they're cleaning up in the province of Alberta, for example. The Conservatives have dropped off nearly 20 points. They're down 18 points in popular support.
How many billions did they spend on the farmers?
The NDP coming up, the Liberals up 10 points, but you see when you look on the left-hand side of the screen, the NDP with 36% overall of the popular support. The NDP very strong there at 32%, so that's where the races will be between the New Democrats and the Liberals.
Little note from our newsroom that news of Brian Mulroney's projected majority in the House of Commons, now a majority, took the money markets by storm, bumping the Canadian dollar up almost 2 cents against the US dollar and nearly 2 yen against the Japanese yen within the first 3 hours of trading in Tokyo. Now we have a man who has been right behind the free trade deal from the very beginning, has traveled the country, has spoken on its behalf time and time again. Peter Lougheed there in Alberta. Good evening, Mr. Lougheed.
Good evening, Lloyd.
So this is a victory for the pro-free traders of Canada. It seems like it was a long time coming and you spent a lot of miles on the road to get it.
It was a tough, hard battle, but I just feel so good tonight because we do clearly have a mandate in the country. Free trade was clearly the issue, and we have a mandate in the country, and as an Albertan, I'm even especially excited that while I'm sitting here, we're going over the top in the majority with a vote in our province.
Some of the Liberals and New Democrats, Mr. Lougheed, that we've been talking to tonight are concerned about the way that the free trade battle has really split the community, that you, as head of the Alliance for Free Trade, that there was a lot of big business money behind your campaign, that big business came in the last few days of the campaign to really help the Tories turn it around. Are you worried about that kind of split now?
No, I'm not, Pam, because it isn't true. I mean, basically what we had here was a movement of people with small business playing a really crucial role. And even though you had organizations that were large, you had chambers of commerce of small businessmen right across this country, business people, and that's the group that supported the alliance and made such a significant difference, because it isn't the ads, with due respect, it's what happens on the streets and what happens in the lunchrooms and at the auction marts. That's what swings votes in my experience, and that's what happened for the pro-free trade group. It was all across the country, and it wasn't just one group such as our alliance, it was all of our associations everywhere working on it, and that makes me so excited. And I don't think it's a problem post the election. I think we'll have a period of reconciliation in which we'll work together and try to bring everybody part of the mandate, because the Prime Minister clearly has a mandate, Pam, to move through with the free trade agreement.
Mr. Lougheed, Craig Oliver made a point, though, and it's well taken, that the Tories were elected tonight largely because people wanted them on economic management. The country is still split on the issue of free trade from what we've been able to tell.
Well, Lloyd, I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, you have a #1 issue. It's the most significant issue campaign we've ever had. It clearly was the #1 issue. We have a majority supporting the only party that is, in fact, behind the agreement. That's a mandate for free trade, and that's a mandate to support it.
But when you look at the popular support for the Liberals and the New Democrats combined, both parties opposing free trade, isn't that another statement?
No, I don't think so, Pam. We work in a parliamentary system on seats. We work on the basis of a majority government. We've got a majority government, and we all accept the democracy of that. It wasn't a referendum, it was an election. It was based on this mandate. No, not a bit. This is something where there is a mandate for the Prime Minister and an unqualified one to have a majority. Would have been a different thing if we were discussing this right now with a minority government. We're not. It's a parliamentary system. Number one issue, majority government, mandate for free trade.
Mr. Lougheed, thank you very much for being with us for this moment. I understand that you're standing by there. We may get back to you a little later in Edmonton, Alberta. CTV News coverage of the 34th general election will resume right after this. Number required, 148. They now have actually 158 seats, and that gives them a clear majority in the House of Commons. The Liberals 83 and the NDP 23. So the NDP, it's hard to tell just what's going to happen in BC.
Haven't hit British Columbia
Haven't
yet.
hit British Columbia yet, but it has not been a good night for them in parts of the prairies.
Some losses in Manitoba and very serious when you get into the urban Winnipeg riding. So that'll be, but again in Saskatchewan too. So we'll have to wait for British Columbia to settle that issue as to whether the NDP do as well as they did in 1984.
In Nunatsiaq riding, we do have something from there. We showed you perhaps a little earlier a sheet that indicated Brian Pearson was leading. We now have Brian Pearson, the former mayor of Frobisher Bay, up there in third place. The Liberal Anahuac is in the lead at this stage, but it's, well, 46 out of 78 polls heard from. He has a lead of 212, so we'll be watching that one, but it's over the NDP. It's Liberal, NDP, PC in that order. In Nunatsiaq, that's in the Eastern Arctic. Now, let's take a look at what's happening in Alberta. We have some sheets to show you, which will indicate the flow of returns and results there. Yellowhead, Joe Clark in the lead by 119 votes at this stage over Preston Manning of the Reform Party. Stan Van of the NDP. Edmonton North, Steve Poprosky, thought to be in trouble at one stage, has a lead of 17 votes right now with only 3 polls heard from. Edmonton Southeast, David Kilgore, the bane of the existence of some conservatives.
A rebel Tory.
Rebel Tory, that's right. A lead of 210. And it would be interesting to see him go back again. He did reform, though, in a sense,
He
didn't
did, but his book was also published in the midst of this campaign, creating some problems. So,
That's
so
right.
that was, but voters had said, yes, maybe they want a strong voice back in Ottawa.
I am told, Pam, that Premier David Peterson is... Here he is. He would be at the campaign headquarters of his brother, Jim Peterson, who was elected tonight in the riding of Willowdale in Toronto. Now we can see him. We can't hear him at this stage, so we're waiting for audio from Premier David Peterson.
Wife is with him?
He did intervene in this campaign in several areas of Ontario. At this moment, the last time we looked at party standings, the Tories were a little ahead in Ontario of the carrying of the 99
That
seats.
started to close down in the last few days of the campaign. The Liberals had been leading throughout the province of Ontario and post the debates, but then in the final days started to close in. David Peterson had been there. He met with John Turner, campaigned not only in his brother's riding, but in several others with John Turner. But
I note
quite
that
enough.
in the area around Niagara Falls, for example, that has gone conservative.
Very surprising, because that's where the grape growers were and where there was so much concern about the effect and impact of free trade. But those ridings and in the southwestern part of the province, a lot of them going NDP, not Liberal, at this particular point.
Yes, while Herb Gray has been re-elected in Windsor, that's no surprise
Stephen
to anyone.
Langdon.
Stephen Langdon in Windsor as well. Mike, you were wanting to say something about that particular point, were you?
I was just going to say that the NDP have been able to hold on in some remarkable places, like Windsor, but yet you get into Winnipeg, and seats that have been there for generations for the New Democrats have changed. And I wonder if the demographics have something to do with it, i.e. a larger concentration of older people in Winnipeg scared about their pensions.
Here we go. Let's go back now to Jim Peterson's headquarters and hear the Premier, David Peterson.
About that. My concerns are job losses. I don't think we needlessly continue fights. I think our job is to bring the country together, work with the other leadership. One of the things that disturbed me about this campaign is some very strong regional elements in it. I frankly was very upset the way some people tried to cast one region against another region, and it was not a regional fight. There were people across this country in favor of the deal and people across the country who were against the deal. And we should approach it that way, as a discussion for all Canadians, not one region against another region.
If John Turner decides tonight that he's going to step down as Liberal leader, will you run for the federal Liberal leadership?
The answer is I don't think he will. I think he should stay on. I think John's brought the party back a very long way, shown great courage and determination. He's reestablished it as a national party. And the answer to your second question is no.
Definitely not.
Yes, I have no interest.
You have 3 pieces of legislation before your provincial parliament that challenge the free trade agreement. Now that Canada has spoken, will you withdraw those 3 pieces of legislation?
They don't challenge the free trade agreement. They assert provincial jurisdiction in areas where there were holes in the federal legislation. For example, we had a discussion about water and whether it was included in the free trade agreement. The federal government finally backed off after we brought the matter forward and brought in protection of their own, and made clear statements. So I think our responsibility will still continue to protect people in the province of Ontario, to make sure that the federal government upholds its responsibility to the people that lose their jobs in this country, because there will be a lot, not just in Ontario, and to make sure that that provincial jurisdiction is protected in a number of areas. Other provinces, I'm sure, have the same views.
So you plan to continue your fight in Ontario against this deal?
I plan to work together with the other provinces and the federal government, and I respect the view of the national government. But they're not always right. The water matter is one particularly, and I say at the same time, they've got to fulfill their responsibility. The people are going to lose their jobs.
The Liberals didn't do as well as you might have expected, perhaps, in the province of Ontario. Do you consider that any reflection on the popularity of your government?
Well, I wasn't running in this campaign, to the best of my knowledge.
But you have a very strong presence in this province. Do you take any message out of tonight's results?
I think the message is that Ontario is basically a tie. And across the country, the Conservatives have more seats. So I respect that. It wasn't a provincial election, it was a national election.
Is there some healing that has to be done here, do you think, post this election, between Ontario and Quebec in particular?
And what can you as the Premier basically do?
Well, the reality is I've talked to a number of the premiers today, and I think that I'm very impressed with the quality of leadership across this country. Sure, we have different points of view at various times, and I think we all understand that, but I think we can work it out. And I think as long as the federal government fulfills its responsibilities and does not yield to the temptation to pitch this as a regional fight, because it wasn't a regional fight, then I think that we can bring this country together.
Thank you very much, Premier Peters.
David Peterson, the Premier of Ontario, making the point that you just underlined, Pamela. He is not interested in John Turner's job. But they all say that, don't they?
They all say that, but he also says he wants to start to work now on free trade. Some interesting questions there, but what happens from provincial premiers who don't like free trade? What will they do? What kind of resistance is possible? And also hearing from David Peters on the question of regional differences. He was the target of an attack by Lucien Bouchard in this campaign, that the anti-free trade sentiment was a plot by Ontario. So that's responding to that.
Yes, and you see, we noted a few minutes ago, Niagara Falls region, Conservative winning. Shirley Martin has defeated John Munro in Lincoln. So he's gone down to defeat. That, too, was expected to be one that would be affected by free trade. So what we're seeing here is that those parts of Ontario where we expected there would be a pro-free trade vote, it hasn't come to that.
It's a patchwork quilt.
This is, hang on just a minute, we have to take a break here, folks. This is Decision 88 on CTV. A picture, you may have caught a glimpse of it. CTV has declared elected Joe Clark, Minister of External Affairs, in the riding of Yellowhead. So the Battle of Yellowhead seems to be over, and it's been won by Joe Clark.
We'll only have one half of that husband and wife team, because Maureen McTeer has gone down to defeat. That would have been the first husband and wife team, but we won't be seeing it in 1988.
Now, Preston Manning did run second, at least the last time we looked at the chart there. So he did draw quite a few votes, and there were some members of the Reform Party drawing votes from what we saw in other charts across the province.
That will hurt other Conservatives. Joe Clark had a very strong lead in there, 31,000.
Now, this is the first return from the BC region, that portion of BC that is in the Alberta time zone, and this is a fight that's gone on for some time between Stan Graham and Sid Parker, who's the former mayor of Kootenay, of Revelstoke rather, and Sid Parker at this moment has a lead of 36 votes. Prince George Peace River, we are declaring Frank Oberle, Minister of Science and Technology in the Mulroney government, re-elected in Prince George Peace River.
But all those strong showings from the Reform Party, in fact, while they were stealing votes from the Tories, not enough to really hurt them, but some very strong showings.
All right. Dave Rinn is standing by in our studios in Edmonton. I believe he has something to say about these Alberta returns that are coming in. Dave?
Well, the early returns, Lloyd, would indicate the Reform Party has now been wiped out in the province of Alberta, where they expected to do well. Preston Manning, of course, running second to Joe Clark. Those two ridings down in southwestern Alberta, McLeod and Wild Rose, both of those now firmly Tory by the early results at least. And we can't expect too much of a change there. The real fight now in Edmonton itself, again, as we indicated earlier, it's Murray Doran and Marie Gordon of the NDP going neck and neck in that riding. And the other riding, Scott Thorkelson, at this point anyway, hanging on in the riding of Edmonton-Strathcona.
There's one. Edmonton East is up there on the screen right now, Dave. That shows Ross Harvey of the NDP leading.
Could be a breakthrough for Ross Harvey. He's a member of the radical left, Lloyd. He will tell you that himself. He's currently the research director for the provincial NDP caucus at the legislature, and he's doing fairly well in these early results. Let's go to Strathcona right now, and you can see Thorkelson is again in a tight race at this point. Una McLean-Evans giving him a run for his money, as well as the New Democrats. Lloyd?
All right, thank you very much. We'll keep an eye on that Bill Lessick riding, because Bill Lessick is the one who refers to himself as a dinosaur. He doesn't make any bones about it, so we'll see what happens there. Now, we haven't heard from them for some time. The Canada AM panel have been sitting over there cheering from the sidelines when appropriate for the various parties. Nancy?
Lloyd, I must tell you that throughout the course of the evening, I have watched each of our political pundits smile, of course, for different reasons, but also look quite surprised at certain points in the evening. Michael, you described this election overall as bizarre. How so?
Well, it's bizarre when you look at the historical pattern that many of us have grown used to for the last 20 years. And I point out that, for example, in Quebec, this time it was swept overwhelmingly by the Conservatives. They got 62 seats, we got 13. And yet in the Ottawa and Eastern Ontario area, which are areas which traditionally, particularly east of Ottawa, we would not have done all that well in, down along the St. Lawrence River, we won all of those seats. So what you almost seem to have had is a complete flip-flop in a variety of seats in Quebec and Ontario compared to the pattern of the period of the 70s and early 80s.
Topsy-turvy?
Yeah, I certainly didn't think I'd ever live to see the day when we won Outremont and lost Leeds-Grenville. We have a fundamental, obviously, problem from the Quebec border all the way to Kingston, running along the St. Lawrence, which used to be bedrock Conservative ridings. I suspect the problem is related to a dairy farmer concern with respect to free trade, which I think is misplaced, but genuine in terms of how they feel about it, and also perhaps some concern about those ridings are not all wealthy ridings, some of which are quite lower demographic in terms of income levels, and I think there is some anxiety about what free trade may do to them, and I think our party has to respond to that.
So obviously free trade has basically broken all the rules so far. Jerry, what are some of the surprises you've seen so far?
Well, other than the sweep of Edmonton that's just beginning, I think what one wants to say is that Peter Lougheed's joy and the others about winning the free trade debate is qualified by this. In the course of the debate, the course of the campaign, we, the Liberals, us, the interest groups against free trade, have changed the free trade agreement in a way that will never be the same again. It can no longer challenge medical care. It can no longer challenge social services. It can no longer challenge environment. This government has said so many times that it won't, that none of those items will be threatened by free trade, that in fact now I believe it can't be, and now we're going to have 100 members of the opposition who are going to make sure that in fact it never does happen.
Is that true, Hugh?
And I think that's a big breakthrough for us.
I think it's fair for Jerry to say that it can no longer do those things. Of course, we argued during the campaign it never did, and that it was a false premise to begin with. I think the battle over whether it did or it didn't has gone in our favor, but the message from Canadians that those things must be preserved in the future has been set, and I think it has been received, and everything I know about our Prime Minister and his own approach to these things indicates he'll be conciliatory and make the kinds of commitments which I think Canadians on all sides of this debate want to hear.
So the irony is the apocalyptic view of what the free trade agreement might do, I think might have been true once, but thanks to this campaign, even though the Tories won, won't be true now, and that's a victory.
Can we assume, Michael, that John Turner will stay on and perhaps lead this crusade to make sure that the Conservative agenda on free trade is changed
obviously,
somewhat?
at some point, presumably not tonight, but at some point in the future, he will comment on his own future. But it seems to me he'll certainly want to stay on and make absolutely certain that the things that he's fought for in the short term going through this debate will be continued. Nancy, one other comment seems to me it's worth noting, that is that the next House has on all sides some very, very good new people On our side, we've got David Walker out of Winnipeg, for example, Paul Mountain out of Montreal, Dennis Mills out of Toronto, some very strong people. And equally, all of us have lost some very good people. We lost A.D. Nicholson, who I think was superb, but David Orlico lost, and Flora MacDonald lost. And I think there are 3 examples of MPs who served their constituencies and all 3 parties extremely well. And in a sense, even though you're happy when you defeat a star, as we did in the case of Flora MacDonald and David Orlico, you always also have to recognize that the country's lost a little in the sense that some talent has been
a big question for the Liberals is whether they're prepared to make a senator the leader of their party, because Hugh and I are ready to throw it to Mike Kirby right this moment.
Every parliament is a renewal. Every parliament brings in new faces and new perspectives. The nature of the Conservative caucus is going to be very, very different in some respects. The nature of the other 2 caucuses are going to be equally different, and I think that'll produce a new dynamic on issues, and I think it's a fresh parliament that Canadians voted for.
I want to say that if we have to endure, my party, the loss of an MP like Jack Harris, and the loss of a good social activist in Rosedale like Doug Wilson. Personally, I am very happy that progressive Tories like Ross Reid in Newfoundland and David MacDonald in Toronto are going to be in that Tory caucus.
Well,
I welcome that.
It's time to bring in the quote by Yogi Berra. It ain't over till it's over. We still have more to watch. On that note, we'll check back with you shortly.
Our sweep of British Columbia coming.
We'll wait for it.
I wish I could say
Here's Lloyd.
I know you can.
Thank you, Nancy. CTV News election coverage will continue in a moment.
And welcome back to CFTO's coverage of Metro Toronto and Ontario ridings. In this Decision 88, we have a special guest waiting, so let's go directly to National Editor Tom Clark.
Thank you, Ken. Well, joining us now via the magic of television is Ontario Premier David Peterson. And Premier, if you can hear me, let me quickly ask you for your brief impressions of what's happened tonight.
Well, it's an interesting election, Tom, in the sense that there are sort of pockets of strength where one hadn't anticipated before, and I'm ultimately a Democrat. I respect the voice of the people of Canada. The Canadians have been involved in a very substantive debate. Obviously, I don't personally agree with the final result, but I respect it.
Well, let's go to the heart of the matter, Premier, and that is that the people have decided, and I think that they have said, that they're willing to give Brian Mulroney a chance to push through this free trade agreement and see what happens. You've been one of the prime opponents to the free trade agreement. Where do you go from here?
Well, the answer is I respect the view of the people of Canada. The Conservatives have a majority, and I assume they will proceed. I mean, part of our responsibility is bring the nation together and work constructively. That doesn't mean, Tom, that I like the situation. It doesn't mean that I don't think there are going to be a great number of adjustments, and the federal government's going to have to be very sensitive to that. They're going to have to be very forthcoming and help the thousands of people that will lose their jobs as a result of this.
Look, I just quickly want to introduce you to a couple of people who are here. Somebody you may know, Herschel Ezrin, I believe he used to work for you,
Herschel,
David.
I hope you're giving Tom good advice. He needs it right now.
I'm giving Larry advice, actually.
Larry Grossman is here as well.
And I do need it.
Well, you've got really a stellar cast there, haven't you, Tom?
And dare I say, Jerry Kaplan is with us as well, Premier.
You really have an assembled group of worthies there.
Let me go back to the free trade thing just for a moment, David, and that is, what is your first move now? You obviously have to drop your opposition to this deal. You said you're going to go ahead with it. Where are you going to put the first bit of pressure on Ottawa?
Well, it's not a question of putting pressure on, Tom. It's a question of bringing the country back together. One of the things I really disliked about this debate, apart from the fact I think it got lower and nastier than any other campaign I've seen, was the fact it pitted region against region, and there was a lot of, shall we say, subterfuge in that regard. I resent that approach to national politics, because there were people across this country of both points of view, and I respect that. And just because somebody disagrees with someone else doesn't make them a liar or a traitor. So we're going to have some healing, and we're going to have require leadership from the provinces and the federal government, and I can tell you that Ontario is prepared to do its part. The federal government's going to have to come forward quickly with programs to help the people that are going to lose their jobs.
Could I ask you a question? What role do you think the Senate has, given the regional differences, as you've outlined quite accurately a moment ago? How do you think the Senate should respond in this circumstance? Surely they have an important role to play in the next couple of months.
Well, I can't speak for the Senate, but I gather they have said they were going to delay the situation, and they will respect the voice of the people of Canada. So I assume it will get reasonably quick passage.
The one person who hasn't made that commitment yet is Alan McKechnie.
Well, I can't speak for the Senate.
I hope they agree, because I agree that the people have spoken and the Senate better not stand in the way of this government.
There is one. Go ahead.
There is the key element in all of this, though, Tom, about adjustment, because we heard a lot of discussion about what free trade would or wouldn't do. We all know that there are winners, there are also some losers, and I think the key and critical issue right now is seeing the federal government come forward with a package at the same time of their adjustment policy.
Okay, quick question.
Far they've been sitting on that with the de Grandpré Commission. We haven't seen anything, and I think a number of the premiers would like to see what they've got in mind, because there's going to be some carnage. There's no question about that.
David, one very quick question for you, and that is that there's presumably going to be an opening at the top of the Liberal Party for a leader. Are you interested?
No, but I don't agree with your assumptions either. I think that John Turner has shown great character in this campaign. I mean, like Larry Grossman, I'm sure, would agree with me that it's not easy leading a political party. There's lots of pressure, and it takes, I think John's shown great grace and great vision. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no vacuum at the top.
Are you ruling yourself out, David, as a candidate for that job?
What you're saying is it's completely hypothetical, and if it wasn't hypothetical, the answer is yes.
I'm not sure I heard it.
I think he is looking for Herschel's advice.
Okay.
Good luck.
Premier Peterson, thank you very much. And let's go back now to Ken Shaw and Christine Bentley.
Thanks, Tom. And now, taking a look at what's happening in the ridings in Metro West, here's Lynn Elioff.
Thanks, Christine. 11 ridings in Metro West. In 2 of them, there have been upsets. Not in Davenport, though. Charles Katcha, this has been his riding for the last 20 years, and it remains that way. In Eglinton Lawrence, there was no incumbent there. Joe Volpe, a Liberal separate school vice principal, has been elected. In Etobicoke Centre, no surprise here, Finance Minister Michael Wilson re-elected. In Etobicoke Lakeshore, the only riding in the country without a Liberal candidate, Patrick Boyer, the PC incumbent, is back in. In Etobicoke North, an upset here. Roy McLaren, the Liberal candidate, has won his seat back from the incumbent Bob Pennock. In Parkdale High Park, another upset. Jesse Fliss is back in after losing to Andrew Witter in '84. In St. Paul's, a tough race between Barbara McDougall and A.D. Nicholson. McDougall has won it. In Trinity Spadina, the incumbent NDP Dan Heap has been re-elected. In York Centre, another incumbent back in, Bob Kaplan. He was first elected in '68. In York Southwestern, John Nunziata, a former City of York alderman, elected in '84, member of the Rat Pack. He's been re-elected. And in York West, Sergio Marchi, the Liberal incumbent, has been re-elected by more than 12,000 votes. And that's what's happened in Metro West. I'm Lynn Elioff.
Rosedale is one of the real interesting races in Metro East, and you can hardly keep Paul Rogers in his seat.
The swing ridings in Scarborough all went Liberal tonight, and it's been back and forth battles everywhere, just as Ken told you. The check marks mean elected, the dots mean incumbent. Neil Young in Beaches Woodbine is back. He's been in there in Beaches Woodbine now for 10 years. The New Democrats take Beaches Woodbine. In Broadview Greenwood, what a battle. Lynn McDonald, the NDP environment critic, waging a campaign there, but Dennis Mills, just too tough for Dennis Mills, parachuted in and he's got it. In Don Valley East, former East York Mayor Alan Redway, re-elected for the Progressive Conservatives. In Don Valley North, Barbara Green, well-known high-profile Metro candidate, she's elected for the Progressive Conservatives. John Bosley, no surprise, Don Valley West, the former Speaker of the House of Commons, he is re-elected. David McDonald in Rosedale, here's what we were talking about before. Let's take a moment here. Bill Graham, the Liberal, has been campaigning to get this seat since 1984. He lost it tonight. Jim Karagianis in Scarborough Agincourt upsets Paul McCross, the Tory. Pauline Browse with a fight of her life tonight. She fought off a tough challenge from Odysseus Katsaitis. She is elected for the Progressive Conservatives in Scarborough Centre, one of those swing ridings. Here's another one. Bob Hicks holds on to it for the Progressive Conservatives. He is re-elected there. In Scarborough Rouge River, where the environment was the big question, Derek Lee defeats Doug Boswell, the Tory. And in Scarborough West, another swing, Tom Wapple of the Liberals defeats Reg Stackhouse, the incumbent Tory. In Willowdale, the Premier was just on television with us. He forgot to congratulate his brother, Jim Peterson, who upsets John Oostrom, the incumbent Tory. This has been the most fun I've ever had in my life. The exciting races going on in Metro East tonight. I'm Paul Rogers.
Thanks, Paul. And now looking at some of the ridings neighboring Metro, here's Bill Hutchison.
Thank you, Christine. Only one riding still to be decided. It is not in Brampton, where John McDermott, the Minister of State for Housing, has retained the riding. He's held that seat since 1979. Brampton-Malton, one of the new ridings. Harry Chadwick has won that for the Progressive Conservatives, defeating Gurjeet Grewal of the Liberals. In Burlington, Bill Kempling has retained that riding. He was first elected in 1972. In Durham, Ross Stevenson, the former provincial minister of the Environment, has been elected as the representative for that area. Halton Peel, another new riding. Garth Turner, the business editor and columnist with the Toronto Sun, going to represent that area. In Markham, Bill Atwell has moved from Don Valley up to Markham to take that seat. John Gamble sat as ran as an independent in that riding. That is some of the results from outside of Metro. We'll be back with more. Right now, it's back to Chris and Ken.
Thank you, Bill. One of the interesting things when you start going through the computer is exactly what's happening with the popular vote. We'll return with that and more of the Metro ridings in just a moment. And welcome back to CFTO's coverage. In Decision 88, I mentioned the popular vote. The Liberals in Metro Toronto up about 7%. The PCs down about 6%. The NDP down about 1%. Bill Hutchison has some more news for us from Metro neighbors.
Lots of news still coming in from the ridings just outside of Metro. In Mississauga East, Albina Garnieri has won this. This is an upset. The PCs had held this riding before. Laurie Pallett losing out there. The riding is alternated back and forth over the last few elections. Don Blencar, no trouble, winning in Mississauga South. In Mississauga West, Robert Horner has been elected for the PCs, defeating Doug Fisher, who was a member of Parliament. In Northumberland, this is our only riding, where it has gone back and forth. Right now, Reg Jewell, the PC, has the lead. Otto Jelinek, re-elected in Oakville Milton, the Supply and Services Minister. In Ontario, Renee Soutins has defeated John Roberts to take that seat for the Conservatives. In Oshawa, Ed Broadbent, the NDP leader, of course, no trouble here. Over 4,000 vote difference between him and Nancy McLean. In York North, Maurizio Bevilacqua has taken the seat from the PCs, defeating Mike O'Brien. And in York Simcoe, a surprise there, John Cole has defeated Frank Stronach, the Liberal candidate. Frank Stronach, of course, the chairman of Magna Corporation. John Cole starting late, taking over from Sinclair Stevens, who did not have his nomination papers signed by the Prime Minister. That is the situation in the ridings surrounding Metro Toronto. I'm Bill Hutchison.
Thanks, Bill. And now looking at Hamilton, Niagara, here's Julie Roper.
Thank you, Christine. There have been some surprises here. In fact, 3 upsets out of 11 ridings. In Brant, Derek Blackburn has been elected. He's the national defense critic of the NDP. He ran a close race, as you can see there. The Bosnack did fairly well at the beginning, but he did drop behind closer to the end. Moving on to Erie. Gerv Fretz, who was elected in '79, is going back to Ottawa. Very tight race there again. Allard Coline, the mayor of West Lincoln Township, really gave him a race. In Haldeman, Norfolk, this is an upset, tobacco country, and Bud Bradley was defeated. Bob Speller's in. In Hamilton East, Sheila Copps back. No contest for her. Very outspoken against free trade, didn't hurt her. She's back. In Hamilton Mountain, Marion Dewar, the former mayor of Ottawa, is in office. In Hamilton Wentworth, Jeff Scott, who we thought may have a problem. It was close at first, but Colin Gibson did lose to Jeff Scott. Moving on to Hamilton West, Peter Peterson, another Tory who was upset by Stan Keyes, the CHCH reporter. In Lincoln, this is a swing riding, and Shirley Martin did get back in, but look at those numbers, really close. John Monroe gave her a real race, very well known in that area. Niagara Falls, Rob Nicholson has been elected, another Tory that's going back to Ottawa. Gary Pilateri did very well there, farm market owner. In St. Catharines, all new candidates, and PC Ken Atkinson, the lawyer, was victorious, leaving Barbara Buchanan behind him. In Welland, St. Catharines, Thorold, another upset. Gib Parent is going to Ottawa, leaving Alan Pitts, the former mayor of Welland, in his own riding. That's what I have from Hamilton, Niagara. I'm Julie Roper.
So let's check in with Jennifer Ward, see what she has from Central Ontario.
Thanks, Ken. I called Central Ontario Tory country, and it's true. Tories have been elected right across the board. Let's look first at Bruce Grey. Gus Mitkiss has been re-elected in that riding. For Cambridge, also Tory Pat Sobeski has been elected. In Kitchener, John Reamer has been re-elected. In Parry Sound, Muskoka, Stan Darling has been re-elected. He was first elected in '72. In Peterborough, Bill Dom has been re-elected. In Simcoe Centre, well, that seat has been held by the Tories for many, many years. No change tonight. Edna Anderson has been elected. In Victoria Halliburton, that has been a Tory seat since 1966. William Scott will carry on that tradition. He has been elected in that riding. In Waterloo, that riding was established under the Redistribution Act of '76. It's been held by the Tories since '79. Walter McLean, the Honourable Walter McLean, had no trouble winning that seat tonight. In Wellington Grey, Dufferin Simcoe, the Honourable Perrin Beattie, our Defence Minister, is back in. He'll be heading to Ottawa. In Guelph Wellington, the swing riding, well, that's gone back and forth between Liberal and Tories for the past 10 years. Well, they voted Conservative again tonight, and Bill Weingart is back in. Finally, in Simcoe North, the Honourable Doug Lewis had no problem winning this seat again for the Conservatives. That's what happened in Central Ontario this evening. I'm Jennifer Ward.
Thanks, Jennifer. And from Tory country to Liberal country, which is what Mike Catrice is calling Eastern Ontario tonight.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Indeed, the Tories were decimated tonight in Eastern Ontario. They went into the race tonight holding 10 of 14 seats. They now have only 2, and the rest are Liberal. And with those Tories that went down to defeat were some pretty famous faces. Maureen McTeer, for one, she went down to defeat against Eugene Bellemare, the Liberal who won that in Carleton, Gloucester. In Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, we have Dawn Boudria, the winner. The Tories, or rather the Liberals, have held this riding since 1952 with one brief exception, and tonight was no exception. Hastings, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington, Bill Van Conant managed to hang on to that one seat for the Tories. In Kingston and the Islands, a big upset. Communications Minister Flora MacDonald went down to defeat against lawyer Peter Milliken for the Liberals. Lanark, Carleton, we have Paul Dick, another Tory who managed to hang on to his seat in Eastern Ontario, one of 2, as we said earlier. In Leeds, Grenville, another upset, Jennifer Cossett, who has held on to the seat since 1982 for the Tories. She lost tonight to Jim Jordan of the Liberals. In Nepean, we have Beryl Gaffney of the Liberals beating Bill Tupper, the great-grandson of Canada's 6th or 7th Prime Minister. In Ottawa Centre, another big upset. Mike Cassidy, the lone New Democrat in Eastern Ontario, went down to defeat. Mac Harb of the Liberals won that riding there tonight. Ottawa South, John Manley of the Liberals has defeated Barry Turner. In Ottawa Vanier, Jean-Robert Gauthier has held on to that seat for the Liberals. That's the surest seat for the Liberals there. They've hung on to that one since 1933. In Ottawa West, Marlene Catterall has defeated David Dobney. That was considered a PC stronghold there, but the Liberals won that one again tonight. In Prince Edward Hastings, Lyle Van Cleef has won for the Liberals. In Renfrew, Len Hopkins hung on to the seat there for the Liberals. And in Stormont Dundas, another Liberal, Bob Kilgore. And just to wrap things up, in Eastern Ontario, the popular vote, 47% in favor of the Liberals. I'm Mike Catrice.
Thank you, Mike. And out to Western Ontario now, where Mike Ongarato says he has a couple of upsets to report.
Western Ontario has been known as Tory country, but it looks like it's going to be known as the split country now, because depending on one last riding, which is still going on at the moment, it looks like it could be split between the Tories and the Liberals over who controls southwestern Ontario. In Elgin, Ken Monteith was brought in for the PCs. There was no incumbent in Elgin. In Essex-Kent, we had an upset. Jerry Picard defeating incumbent Jim Caldwell in that area. In Essex-Windsor, Steve Langdon, the NDP candidate, returned to office there. He was the incumbent. In Huron-Bruce, Murray Cardiff for the PCs returned to office. He was the incumbent. In Kent, another upset, Rex Crawford defeating Elliot Hardy. And that was quite a race, but Rex pulled ahead in the later polls and managed to steal it away from Elliot. Lambton Middlesex, another upset here. Ralph Ferguson, the Liberal candidate, defeating PC incumbent Sid Fraley. In London East, again, another upset. Joe Fontana defeating PC candidate and incumbent Jim Jepson. In London West, Tom Hawkin winning it once again for the PCs. He was the incumbent. In Oxford, Bruce Halliday winning for the PCs. Again, he was the incumbent. Perth Wellington, Henry Brightwell winning for the PCs there. In Sarnia Lambton, again, the PCs win. Ken James, the incumbent, being returned to office. In Windsor St. Leclerc, Howard McCurdy, the NDP candidate, once again, he was the incumbent, so he was returned to office. And in Windsor West, no contest here whatsoever. The Honourable Herb Gray was returned to office by a large margin. The one riding we were mentioning that is quite interesting. 99.5% of the polls have reported in. There is only a 30-vote difference at this point. Terry Clifford, the incumbent PC, managed to pull ahead on the last results. He now leads Garnet Bloomfield by, I said, 30 votes. 99.5% are in. That's southwestern Ontario. I'm Mike Ongarato.
Thanks, Mike. And now let's move to northern Ontario, where Kate Wheeler says there's only one race left to be decided.
And that race is in Kenora, Rainy River, Chris, where at the moment Liberal Bob Nolt is leading incumbent New Democrat John Parry by 300 votes. In Algoma, Maurice Foster has retained his seat for the Liberals, and Reginald Belair continues the 55-year Liberal reign in Cochrane Superior. NDP incumbent John Rodriguez returned to Nickelbelt in Nipissing. Liberal Bob Wood upset incumbent Tory Mo Mantha. But the most surprising upset came in Sault Ste. Marie, where school principal Steve Butland ousted Solicitor General James Kelleher, winning the seat for the NDP. Diane Marleau takes over from Doug Frith as the Liberal incumbent for Sudbury. Ian Angus retains his seat for the NDP in Thunder Bay Atikokan, but voters in Thunder Bay Nipigon elected Joe Camuzzi for the Liberals over NDP multiculturalism critic Ernie Epp. Tories in Temiskaming for a second term, John McDougall returned, and the final upset came in Timmins-Chapleau, where NDP Sid Sampson ousted PC Aurel Gervais. The Liberals take 6 of the 11 ridings in Northern Ontario. I'm Kate Wheeler.
Thank you, Kate, and we'll leave our election coverage for just a moment now. After the commercial, we'll come back with Dave Duvall and Joe Tilley and the weather and sports.
Panel with Tom Clark.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I'm sitting here with Larry Grossman, the former leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservatives, Herschel Ezrin, the former Chief of Staff to Ontario Premier David Peterson, and to Jerry Kaplan, all-round big shot in the NDP. Jerry, I want to start with you. What happened? What happened tonight? What happened?
Yeah,
Look,
big shot.
to put it very bluntly, you went nowhere. Your popular vote did not increase. 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, you stood at the threshold of making some real advances in this country. You didn't do it. What went wrong?
What are you trying to say, Tom? I don't understand this attack.
In my own wishy-washy type of way, Jerry.
Don't you think we had enough trouble tonight without you attacking us?
No, I'm not attacking.
Well, I could tell you we'll get more seats than ever before, but the fact is that it's quite disappointing, and the fact is, as you said, that the expectations were higher. We got detoured a little bit when the debates didn't go well. I mean, there's no point in pretending otherwise. We had trouble getting our campaign back on track. We had trouble moving into the free trade debate that started between Mr. Mulrooney and Mr. Turner, and we were frankly marginalized for a while, and we never did recover.
But Jerry, it started, surely, it seemed to me, between Mr. Broadbent and Mr. Mulrooney, and at the debate, Mr. Turner seemed to take it away. And then I don't know quite what Ed Broadbent did after the debate. He didn't seem to make a concerted effort to take it back.
They had some strategic problems, but let me happily pay tribute to John Turner. It's usually somebody in my seat who talks about the moral victories we managed to win every time. I think there's a real moral victor in this campaign, and it was John Turner.
Yes, for sure.
He revivified himself. It was he who put free trade high on the agenda, and thanks to him, and with our help and interest groups, it is no longer possible for a ruthless free trade agreement to be.
We're going to come back to all of you in a minute, but back to the anchor desk.
Thanks, Tom. And before we go, a fire in an abandoned building downtown resulted in injuries to 2 Toronto firefighters. The 2 men were injured when they fell through the floor of the 2nd story. The building was slated for demolition and was unoccupied. The firefighters were taken to St. Michael's Hospital with undetermined injuries. Their names haven't been released.
And when we take a look at what's happened in the metro area, you can see that the Liberals have taken 7 seats tonight from the Tories, and that's the big story here. And we'll return in just a moment with Decision 88.
As we look at the charts and see that the PCs are leading and elected in 164, 148 required for a majority in the House of Commons, Liberals in 84, NDP in 34, and the political map of Canada is being changed in some very fundamental ways tonight in this fascinating contest we've been watching all across the country, and we are now watching results come in from the province of British Columbia as we continue our Election 88 coverage here on CTV.
CTV news coverage of the 34th general election continues. Decision 88. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Yes, there have certainly been some sea changes tonight all across this country, haven't there? It's been fascinating.
When you look at the East Coast and you see the Liberals coming on strong there, the Tories making even larger gains in Quebec than last time around and losing some key seats for the Liberals there, it's just amazing.
We are going to take a look, Pamela, at just how the notables have done from the various parties. Margaret Mitchell, we are declaring elected in Vancouver East. That comes as no surprise to anyone who's been following that riding, I'm sure. And here come the notables. Reid, elected. McCreath, now we're in the Maritimes here. McCreath elected. Gauvin defeated. That was Jean Gauvin, the former Hatfield cabinet minister. Bernier elected, and Bertrand elected in Quebec. And as we flip the charts, Jean Corbeil, the popular mayor of Anjou, has been elected in his riding in Montreal. Robert Cresser, the youngest MP running in this election apparently, has been defeated by Sheila Finestone in Montreal. Maureen McTeer has been defeated. Anthony Abbott, who was running as a Conservative this time, having crossed over from the Liberals in a riding in Toronto, he's been defeated by a Liberal. And David MacDonald elected in the riding of Rosedale in Toronto. And we continue on with our notables. Harris, Jack Harris of the NDP, defeated in Newfoundland. Derek Blackburn, who's held that riding in Brant in Ontario since 1971, has been elected. Stephen Langdon elected in his riding in Windsor. Marion Dewar, we are now saying, has been defeated in her riding in Hamilton.
Very surprising, very popular, hard-working constituency person, the former mayor of Ottawa, who shifted her focus to Hamilton.
And you notice there at the bottom, Michael Cassidy defeated in Ottawa as
to
well.
a Liberal.
Lynn McDonald defeated in Toronto tonight.
And look at this one, David Orlico defeated in Winnipeg. And Blakey elected in Winnipeg-Transcona for the NDP. Vic Althouse elected, that's in that battle in Wadena, the heart of the continent.
I've been following it well, and that was two incumbents up against each other. Jack Scowen has gone down there.
Lauren Nystrom of the NDP, re-elected in Saskatchewan, no surprise there. And Sven Robinson is leading in Burnaby Kingsway with one poll reporting. Here comes some BC results. In Caribou-Chilcotin, Dave Worthy, new candidate running there for the PCs in a PC riding, is leading. In Fraser Valley East, Ross Belcher is trailing at this moment by 62 votes to Olds of the NDP.
That is a surprise, because that is safe Tory country. It may be that the Christian Heritage vote or the
Reform Party
is having an effect there.
New riding here, Okanagan, Similkameen, Merritt. King is trailing at this stage. Two polls heard from Prince George, Bulkley Valley. Whoops, and we're flipping right over to Vancouver Quadra to have a look at how John Turner's doing. 45-vote lead at this stage over Bill Clark of the PCs, but only two polls heard from. That, by the way, is the rhinoceros, the J.C. Turner, and they were worried about that.
It was going to give some problems because his name appeared earlier on the ballot before John Turner's, John N. Turner.
But written on the ballot is the party name.
Yes.
I don't think most voters would have much trouble with that.
It's very small print, though, Iona.
25% of the voters in Quadra, English isn't their first language.
I'll tell you, though, the rhinoceros candidate indicated that he was upset, too, that John Turner, John Napier Turner, would take votes from him. So there we are with the National Party standings again, 165 now, as we have 287 of 295 ridings heard from. Here's an early return from Vancouver Centre, Pat Carney's old riding, and it shows Kim Campbell leading at this stage, with Tex Enemark, the Liberal, coming second, and Den Hertog of the NDP third. That's with two polls out of 231 heard from.
This could flip 6 times in the next half hour.
That's right. Kim Campbell at this stage has a 45-vote lead.
In Vancouver Centre, which I know well, a split vote helps the Conservatives. If you have strong NDP, strong Liberal vote, the Conservatives have the edge, and I'm hoping that will happen tonight for Kim.
But as you say, great changes, because the split vote used to advantage Ron Basford once upon a time. Now it advantages the Tories.
Right. There are more seats in British Columbia this time, by 4, in fact. Perhaps we should just indicate that there has been this redistribution across the country. For those in BC who are seeing that extra number of seats, that takes BC up to 32. It takes Alberta from 21 to 26 and takes Ontario from 95